contribution.
I call this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting together to order this June 1st, 2017. And Madam Secretary, could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Norberg.
Here.
Commissioner Colton.
Here.
Vice Chair Keating. Chair Chapman.
Here.
Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Bash.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. If you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Director Fitzler, do we have any current events or reports tonight? Oh, he snuck away. Okay. We'll call on him later. At this time, if in order to address the commission, would appreciate if you would fill out a call to the public forum that's out in the lobby. And if you would be kind enough to turn that in to our secretary, as I mentioned before, we appreciate it. At this time, for members of the public that would like to address the commission on issues that are not on the agenda, this would be the time to do so. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our first agenda item, and that is the consideration and action approving the May 18th, 2017 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes. Is there any discussion?
I move to approve.
Seeing none, then we'll accept a motion. Thank you. We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If you could please vote.
Motion passes 6 votes in favor.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a consideration and action on a site plan amendment for the Radiant Church on Mountain Vista Ranch, PAD, generally located on the northwest corner of Reams Road and Paradise Lane. And we have Mr. Wingard, our planner, for a presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. You may remember that this item was before you about a month and a half ago, and it was tabled as the staff was going to work with the applicant, and we had a very good chance to meet and go over some of the things and come to what we think is a good compromise that will benefit all involved. The location is the Radiant Church is south of Bell, right on the west side of Reams Road. A little bit closer in, showing the whole campus area, bordered by the collector roads Paradise and Mountain View Boulevard on the south and the west. And this is a site layout. And these 3 buildings highlighted in red are the buildings in question. This whole process initiated by a neighbor complaint about the buildings being painted and very bright colors. And you'll see those colors as we come in. And I'd like to point out that, well, this is the previous original elevations, very earth tone colors, beiges and browns, very typical of the neighborhood and of the PAD as it called out for earth tone colors. This is the original color palette, including the 3 colors that were used for all these buildings. Now the preschool and the youth center that we're going to be showing here, they were part of the colors. Now, when we went out there and we discussed this facility with the applicant, you know, they wanted to color the buildings to make them more festive and open, inviting. And they did not intend to offend any of the neighbors. So what we did is we looked at these buildings, and the youth building and the preschool building are set back in, not really that visible from the roads. The preschool, which is highlighted here, the only face of the building that faces the collector street is has colorful playground equipment right in front of it and fencing for the preschool. So as you can see, these the very vibrant colors all the way around. And because of the area facing the street that has the playground equipment in front of it, staff is not seeking any kind of changes to this particular building. And this is the playground equipment that is shown, and you can see that the yellow color along there. The second building is the youth building, and this is really tucked in there into the back, very far off of Reams Road. And it uses the color of the copper red and the gray in there. And that, again, staff is not really seeking to change that color. The building that really seemed to cause the issue with the residents, and we were able to talk to a couple residents that did have issue, was the elementary school. And 3 of the sides of those buildings face those streets, the Paradise and the Mountain View Boulevard. Now, this is what the building looks like now. And you can see that the front is very colorful. And when I say front, this is that faces internal to the campus. And with discussions, we were able to determine that keeping just those internal faces in the campus would not cause any harm. But the other 3, the side where you see blue here, was the colors that were offending the neighbors. And what they've done, they've gone back, taken that sable color from the original color palette, and they're going to be using those on those 3 sides. And you can see and how they're using the sable on the side. This blue, it kind of blends in with the sky, but still was a very bright color and would go back to that sable color. The proposed site plan, we feel, demonstrates compliance with the Mountain Vista Ranch PAD. The reviewers have indicated no objection to the request. And I'd also like to add that the original complainant was able to see these drawings, online, and wrote back to us that this is going to look great, and was very satisfied with what staff and the applicant, who was very willing to work with us, were able to compromise with. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Colton.
First, I'd just like to say thank you to the representatives from Radian, as well as the representatives from our city, and the ability to get together, put great thoughts and great ideas together to come up with a great solution.
Thank you.
I know the old phrase, like a good neighbor.
Yes.
You want, your paint colors to fit within community standards, and so this is really nice, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Norbert.
I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Bash.
I commend the compromise that you came up with. And just one additional question, will this be used in other circumstances, whether it be church facilities or other buildings? Will we be setting a precedent with what we've done here?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, very good question. Any expansion on this is going to have to come back through and is going to follow the paint palette here. The precedent, it's very hard to say, as this particular PAD called out earth tones, and that's what was done here. Other PADs are not that specific, but what we've done here, going back and just including that in, I think really did address that. And if the precedent is, we look for compromise, and we want to work well with the neighbors and make them a valuable part of the community.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
After we've reached this compromise, were there any other residents come forward with any other objections to these paint colors?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, no, there was no, just that one comment from the original complainant who was satisfied with the compromise that we had.
There were any community outreach meetings regarding this?
As this is a site plan, there was not a requirement for outreach on that. But, you know, as we had that meeting previously, we hope that that reached out to the neighbors.
And I guess I just have one more question, and it's just, I don't understand. If the PAD call for earth tones, and it was went ahead and painted before they made the request for this change, is that correct?
Mr. Commissioner, yes, that is true. Typically, when a non-residential project paints a building other than the paint palette that it was selected originally, it would come in for a administrative minor site plan amendment.
Right.
This did not do that, and as a result of that complaint, we initiated this case to either change what was in the PAD or to come up with a compromise for that.
Okay, I guess the precedent I'd like to set is if people are going to change the paint palette from the original PAD, that they come to the city first before they're doing it.
Absolutely.
I have no other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Good compromise. I did my research and I went to 3 different paint companies that looked up earth tones. And I discovered to my surprise that blue is an earth tone. And bright green is an earth tone. And they have changed since I remember earth tones. But I have no other questions, just compliments on that.
Very good. Thank you.
I appreciate the educational opportunity.
Thank you. I have no questions myself. Are there any further questions?
Reservation.
Are there any further questions from the commission? Seeing none, then I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve a site plan amendment for Radiant Church at Mountain Vista Ranch Pad, generally located on the northwest corner of Reams Road and Paradise Lane.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Could we please vote?
Motion passes 6 votes in favor.
Thank you. Our next item, number 3 on the agenda, calls for a public hearing. And this would be for the consideration action on a conditional use permit for Health for Life medical marijuana dispensary located on the northeast corner of Litchfield Road and Soledad Street. And we have a presentation by planner Mr. Wingard.
Good evening once again. In this, we don't get a lot of these requests. If you remember, back in 2011, we did do the code change for our code addition to regulate facilities within the city, and we did have one shortly thereafter a facility for Allgreens, which has since closed and is now just simply a clinic. Their location, they moved to Sun City along Bell Road. And since this is a little bit different, and there was going to be a lot of questions, I'm sure, on this, not only for this, but for a lot of the information leading up to it, the state laws and such. And what we're doing after my presentation, we're going to have the applicant come up and give a brief presentation of their own to go over, not to rehash what staff has gone over, but additional items of concern. The proposed site is in the Surprise Point PAD. This is a non-residential PAD located along Waddell and Litchfield Road. This is in front of the theater, the bowling alley, at the furthest northwest corner of the overall center. A little bit closer in, you can see how this site is in relation to the rest of the facility. Previously, about 2 months ago, we had a Filberto's come in that was taking another pad on this facility. Now, at this point, and you'll notice this in one of the conditions, the applicant is just doing a use-only permit. So they're making sure that this use is going to be allowed on this area. They will have to come back in for a site plan to for the site, the elevations, the landscaping, et cetera. And what we did ask for was just a conceptual site plan to show how this works out. As you can see, this is going to be a 3,500 square foot facility. Going back to our code, you'll know that that 2,500 is the maximum size for a dispensary. This is going to have an additional 1,000 feet that will be that could be leased out to someone else. The applicant at the citizen review meeting actually proposed another condition, and we'll see that at the end of this application, and you probably have the paper in front of you, that will limit what that use is, so there is not anything such as a smoking accessory shop in that building. The elevations, very typical for the Surprise Point. This is following the same stone, color palette, basic architecture of that facility, nothing really standing out. Now, one of the things that the city did when we did the update to the code in 2011 was to have buffering distances. You know, the state itself has a buffer distance of 500 feet from a school. We went further, and we have distances in this. We're showing residentially zoned properties, church or worship facilities, and dwelling units. And as you can see, this exceeds those regulations. As you can see, the worship facility located over on Dysart, dwelling units 600 feet to the north east, and residentially zoned property is the undeveloped portion of Marley Park to the west. Also, we have regulations about charter schools, primary and public schools, daycare facilities, park or playgrounds. And this does meet and exceed those. The park and playground, it meets. And as I can show here, there is actually a strip of land, a L-shaped strip of land in Litchfield Park that is not necessarily function as a park, as it's more retention. But because the plat called that out as recreational space, staff included that and it made the 1,500 feet distance apply to that as well. It does meet it by a couple feet. And then the last two are any other medical marijuana facilities and any sexually oriented business or similar use. And this does exceed. There's a facility about 2 miles to the east and outside of the city. And sexually oriented business, there's the Coyote Cabaret located a little over 5 miles to the south in Glendale. And just showing those distances. Other conditions that are included in the City of Surprise ordinance was that the maximum size, as we spoke about, this will be meeting that. It will be in a permanent building, not a trailer, cargo unit, or even a bus, as it's been seen in other states. Also, drive-through facilities won't be allowed in the city for this use, and this includes that. This facility will not be drive-through. And then one that was added by the commission back in 2011 was the concern about the remnants, the byproducts of this. And so that we cannot simply put those in a bin. They will have to be removed by a different method. Now, as I said, the applicant did include this condition. So this would be condition D. The head smoke, vape, or other similar paraphernalia would not be allowed in that area outside there or adjacent. Staff did have a citizen outreach meeting on May 17th at just about 2 miles from the site at school, and we had probably about 20 people. There were a mixed pro and con for that, and the applicant was able to present their recommendations, and we were able to discuss with the the public, and that's where that condition did come out of. Now, as I said, I'm going to be handing this over to the applicant, and these are some of the items that I did not touch on, but may be of interest, and that is who is CGX, the actual facility owner, a little bit into the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act, just to bring you up to speed on that, as well as the Arizona Department of Health Services, who actually regulates all these facilities. We'll get into the CHAWS, which was the original way to spread these facilities out, a little bit into the proposed facility and how that works with that, dispensing procedures. As you know, a lot of people don't realize how these facilities actually work, and this will be some helpful information to find out exactly how that works. Another question that staff has heard is, why is this site? And the applicant is going to describe why this site and difficulty finding an additional site. Compliance with city code and the general plan, as well as one concern that people have was security. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Lindsay Shuby, who will discuss these. So.
If you'd be kind enough to give us your name for the record, please.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Bart. My name is Lindsay Shuby. I'm with the law firm of Gamage and Burnham, and we're at 2 North Central in Phoenix, Arizona. We have a whole bunch of people with us tonight, so we hope to be able to answer any and all of your questions that you have after I make a brief presentation. Again, not wanting to echo too much of what Bart already said. Again, I'm Lindsay Shuby. I work with a great planner named Nick Sobraski, and he has a lot of valuable information and does a lot of due diligence on all the different site work here. So, I mean, between he and Bart, we can answer a whole lot of questions. Part of the presentation tonight is going to be Mel McDonald. Mel McDonald is an attorney who works with the owner and can speak a little bit to her integrity and to the business structure. And then I also have with me Ron Emerson. Ron is with the Senior Operations of Health for Life and can answer any questions. We will not all speak, but hopefully with all of us present, if there's any questions you have, we can answer them. Oh, how do I do this? I did a practice part, and now oh, there we go. Perfect. Who is CGX Health for Life? I represent a nationwide owner and operator of medical marijuana dispensaries, cultivation, and infusion facilities. She currently owns and operates cultivation 2 dispensaries and cultivations in the state, and she's working at getting more exposure to the rest of the country. She operates all of her facilities in compliance with state and local law. She has never been cited by the police or by the state. So how did we get here? You know, Bart touched on it. In 2011 was your first exposure for any of you that were on the commission at the time when you guys adopted your surprise zoning ordinance. But in 2010, Prop 203 was passed, legalizing medical marijuana. It allows residents with certain medical conditions to exposure to the medicine for certain medical purposes. At that time, through that proposition, DHS, the Department of Health Services, was designated to regulate the sale and the use of the dispensaries and the cultivation. I think it's important to note that when DHS was appointed to run the medical marijuana industry here in the state, they set up a whole bunch of rules. Those rules have not been changed. They're all still in place. I think as we've come through with the evolution of this industry, there's been some rules that have come to light that maybe people may or may not have known were there, but the rules have never changed. So those were all in place at the same time as your city adopted your ordinance in 2011. What did they do? They first of all tried to figure out how many licenses they were going to give and where they were going to go. They separated the state into 126 CHAWs, or actually they already had these CHAWs, community health areas. And what they do in these CHAWs is they can track cancer rates, primary care doctors, different land features, different jurisdictions. So they had these CHAWs, and they said, we're going to start by giving one license to each CHA. And so that was the original lottery that went out in 2012. You can see here we are in the Surprise CHA. It's an average size CHA. What you may or may not know, it is 30,000 acres. 30,000 acres. That's very big. It's bigger than the city of Tempe, than the jurisdictional limits of Tempe. There is currently only one, and Bart touched on this, there's only one dispensary in the CHA, but it's outside of the city limits. It was in the city limits and it relocated outside of the city limits, but there's just one in the CHA. Again, Bart touched on this, I won't even talk about it, but 3,500 square foot building, no drive-through, no byproducts in the exterior refuse containers. And also we cannot, it is illegal to consume any of the medicine on property. So just to make sure that's clear. I didn't know much about this either until I worked on the Prasada development. I work on mixed use, a variety of different projects. So it is very interesting learning about all this. And then again, there's very, very highly regulated when it comes to security alarms, cameras, the maintenance of those records. And the owner that I am working with here has a very, very good relationships in other jurisdictions that she works in with police and fire. We welcome regular visits. We work with the police department. Mel can talk a little bit about that, but we've had very, very good relationships with all those departments, and we welcome police input, even at the site planning stage when we have to come back to you. Any suggestions that your police and fire have to the development and the site planning of the building. So how do these work? I had never been in one before I did this. It's again it's different. It's new. It's an evolving part of at least my growing up. Patients enter through a lobby. When you go through the lobby, you see a patient consultant. You have to give them a card. If you don't have a card, you don't get in. You know, I think there were some misconceptions in some of this work that I do. That someone can come in off the street, a teenager who wants illegal cannabis to be able to purchase it. You can't. If you don't have a card, you don't get in. Once you are cleared by a patient consultant and you have a card and the state is notified that you are in the dispensary, you sit and wait until a patient consultant is ready to meet with you. The patient consultant brings everyone back one at a time. You meet with an individual patient consultant to talk about what your need, what your medication is, the quantity that you get. And we also have HIPAA rules. I mean, this follows very similarly to a doctor's office. So after the point that you work with a patient consultant, maybe it's your first time, so you're learning a lot, or you've been there a couple times and you realize that certain medicines work better or worse for your ailment. At the point of sale, that all happens there with your patient consultant. All that information is transferred directly to DHS. So there is zero opportunity to go to another dispensary in a different part of town and get more medicine. It's very, very highly regulated, and the information transfer is really unbelievable to make sure that no one gets more medicine than they're allotted to get. There's also very, very accurate inventory controls. They call it seed to sale. When a seed is planted in a cultivation facility, that seed and any product of that seed is tracked to its final sale. That's all tracked not only in the inventory system for the dispensary, but with the state as well. And talking about the byproduct, that is something that you guys added at the commission. I just learned that from Bart. It's also a state regulation. And so all the byproduct has to be managed, maintained, and taken out by a certified company, and all that is recorded with the state. So why this site? Why are we here? Bart is sick of getting my phone calls. Bart, does this one work? Bart, come on, please. No, this site works because it's got the right zoning. We meet the separation requirements, and we've got property that's available for purchase or lease. So there's a bunch of different parts that all have to work together. The client that I represent is in escrow to purchase this property. She has a long-term commitment to the city of Surprise. She's not just leasing it. She's going to buy the property. She's going to build a building from the ground up and own and operate a very, very high-class dispensary if we are approved by your commission. The other part is adequate infrastructure. there are a few other properties available in the city of Surprise. They don't have the roads, the water, the sewer. And while this is a business and a profitable business, you can't justify the expense of putting in all the infrastructure. So this property really is situated in a fabulous place. So again, limited property for sale or lease. We intend to buy this and become a great member of the city of Surprise if we're able to move forward. A lot of them do not meet the zoning requirements. A lot of them do not meet the separation requirements, and a lot of them lack that infrastructure. I'm talking about water, sewer, roads. So Bart touched on this, but commercially zoned property, we're allowed community commercial, regional commercial, and industrial subject to a use permit, which is why we're here in front of you, plus the separation requirements. We are also, this is a kicker, and I had to call Bart to clarify when we started working in the city of Surprise on this uses. They're prohibited in PAD property that has other residentially zoned property. So think about this. A client brings me a piece of property. We look at it. Okay, yes, you've got the right zoning. Yes, you meet the separation requirements. Darn it. There's residential in this PAD. Chandler and Surprise. Near PADs. Brennan Ray can attest to the fact you guys have so many PADs. And wonderful. It's great for community building, but it very much limits where dispensaries can go in your city. Because even if I can find a piece of property that meets all the requirements, if there's residential further away and we've met the separation requirements, but it's still in the PAD, we can't do it. Mustard color, PADs, mostly with residential components in them. So again, it's just a very, very limiting factor when you are looking for properties for this use. Bart already walked through, and he did such a nice job walking through the separation requirements, so I won't worry about that. Again, just touching on the, Prasada, I had the pleasure of working on that, Marley Park, all of these lovely, huge, big PADs, great community building communities, could not have it in there. They would require a PAD amendment in order to take the property out of the PAD to have a dispensary in it. Another interesting part, and this is interesting that you learn as you don't learn this in law school, you learn this as you start to practice land use law. Other property that is not residential, but we just throw R43 on it. Why not? Where the railroad tracks are, all R43. Where the golf course is, all R43. Of course, it makes sense. We put it under schools. We put it under churches. That's very logical, and it has a protected use category of its own. But residentially zoned property, even if it is not, so I can find a piece of property there along Grand that is zoned properly, meets the separation requirements, but gosh darn it, we're close to the railroad tracks or we're close to the golf course. And so that makes that property ineligible. Infrastructure, I touched on it. This corner, this sliver, as Bart likes to call it, of Surprise is kind of the last remaining place for a dispensary. But some of this property down here just doesn't have the infrastructure. And it's just so cost prohibitive to do the infrastructure requirements to bring in a 2,500 or a 3,500 square foot building. So that's what's nice about this site. We've got the zoning. We've got the separation requirements, and there's infrastructure there. Before I take you through the compliance with the CUP criteria, which is the final part of my presentation, I'm just going to ask Mel McDonald to come up. Mel can introduce himself, but he's going to speak just a little bit to Beth Stavola, the owner and operator of the proposed dispensary.
Thank you. My name is Mel McDonald. I'm a resident of Gilbert, Arizona, which is on the other side of this planet from the drive over here tonight. A real challenge. I learned a lot about Surprise during this drive. I want to just give you a little bit of background and tell you a little bit about the owner. I was a Superior Court judge in Arizona from 1974 to 1981. In 1981, I was appointed by President Reagan to be the United States Attorney for the District of Arizona. As such, I led the fight on drugs in Arizona. That was our number one priority. I would meet with local and state officials, tribal leaders throughout the state, setting national drug policies. Anybody that interviewed me in the 1980s, I was pictured as the crime fighter. I served for the president's first term. In 1997, I had a son, my stepson, age 14, that was hit by a car in Gilbert, suffered massive brain damage, also became and suffered from epilepsy. For years, he went from 180 to 119 pounds. The grand mal seizures, I got to know pretty much all of the fire department who would always respond to the 911 calls. In about 2004 or 5, my son, I noticed, had started to do some eating. And before the nausea, he would sometimes go days without eating. My wife, at some point, confided it to me that what he was doing was using marijuana. Well, as a former U.S. attorney and as a judge, I said, that isn't going to be around me. And if you're ever caught helping him, you're going to be in the headlines. You've got a good attorney that can defend you, but you're going to have problems. When the initiative passed in 2010, I saw the tears of joy in her eyes. It was now finally legal. With this miraculous medicine, I never thought the day would come that I would be advocating for medical marijuana, but I have become a disciple because I've seen what it has done in my son's life. Some of the tinctures from the medical marijuana I used to give my sister who died of cancer in Utah a couple of years ago. All of the medications were not solving the problem, but the medical marijuana is. In 2012, I came out of the closet, if you will. Some of the prosecutors were bringing litigation. They were going to try to stop the medical marijuana passing in 2010. And I came out at the legislature and supported it, much to the surprise of everybody. And I did it because I saw that it worked. Several years later, a lady by the name of Beth Stavola, who is the managing person out here, contacted me. And she had a CHA that was in Douglas, but they had a grow site in Chino Valley. And she had partnered up with a gentleman, and she says, the guy is crooked. He is trying to bring illegal marijuana seeds into the state and product. We need to do something about it. What would you do as the former U.S. attorney? I said, let's fire him and get him out. We actually took the case to court and litigated the case. He was driven out of his partnership position, and I thought that is remarkable. Then she came to me and she says, Mel, I'd like to ask you to do a favor for me. Would you take a role in our medical marijuana dispensary in Mesa? And so I understand some of you have been to Mesa East and Mesa North. Mesa North was the chairman of that board was my wife. I became the chairman of Mesa East. But I said, Beth, there's going to be some ground rules for me coming on. Ground rule number one, I'll agree to be chairman of the board, but I also want to be able to elect the vice chairman. Who did I bring on? Don Tucker. Don Tucker was the head of the United States Secret Service. When the Pope came to Arizona, Don Tucker protected the Pope. He protected President Reagan when the president came to Arizona. Later, he was appointed by President Bush to be the United States Marshal, which is a top federal appointment in the district. Later, he was appointed by the president at that time, Bill Clinton, to be chief of security for all federal courts in the United States. When the Murrah courthouse was bombed, Don Tucker was the lead investigator. And I said, I want Don on because Don, I want to provide the security and advice. One of the ground rules for Beth Stavola was that when the dispensary opens, for us to be involved, and we were doing this without fee, we had volunteered to do it. we're going to have training programs, and we literally made videotapes of that program. And every one of our employees at East and North, we gave this orientation. And I've done it to other areas also, Scottsdale's Chaw. And the rules that we laid out, number one, not one seed goes out the door. If it does, and you violate the rule, you're not only fired, but we're turning you into the police. Rule number two is that if we find patients that are breaking the law, we are going to turn those patients in for prosecution. And literally in Mesa East, we had an incident where one of the card holders we found out was taking the medicinal marijuana and selling it afterwards. And we called Sheriff Babbo at the time and said, we will give you the videotape to help you in the prosecution. What I'm trying to say is sometimes in an industry, it will attract all kinds of people. The applicant for this CHA is an A-plus human being. She is from Wall Street. She has done investing, a mother of 6 children. I've been to her place in New Jersey. She has a commitment to making sure the rules are followed. And the beauty from my standpoint, I've seen it, that oftentimes, and I was ingrained with the same thought, you think of marijuana, you think of crime. This is a medicine. I've seen the medicine work. I knew Will Hubble and made some appearances with him when this program was going forward. They've got some outstanding protections. DHS has done an incredible job in protecting the integrity of this program. I would encourage you to support these planning and zoning modifications. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Lindsay. Thank you. It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you.
Perfect, Mel, thank you. Okay, so the last part of my presentation, which is the CUP test, right? That's why we're here. We talked about everything else, kind of gave you the background on the medical marijuana law passing, but the CUP test. The first one is location and character of the use shall be in harmony with the surrounding area. You know, as a land use lawyer, we're kind of given a book of rules, and our book of rules is your zoning ordinance. So whether I'm coming at you with an apartment project or, you know, whatever it is, we look to the zoning ordinance. And in this case, we finally worked with Bart and we found a place that meets all the separation requirements. We're going to operate in a very, very similar capacity to a medical retail use, which would be permitted by right in this PAD with the C2 zoning. And it's less intense and very compatible with the existing planned industrial business park employment with the rest of the park and the PAD zoning. The proposed use shall not impair the integrity, character of the community, nor shall it be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare. Mel spoke to the character of the applicant that's in front of you. She absolutely has a commitment. She's got a big investment if she's buying the land and putting up a building to work with your local officials. Not only do we have extensive, strict security measures that are required by DHS, but we will go above and beyond that in working with the local police and fire. We have extensive security, interior and exterior cameras, alarm monitoring, cellular monitoring, panic buttons, strict check-in and dispensary procedures. Will operate obviously in compliance with all state, DHS, and city requirements. And again, this owner and operator has never been cited. One thing that's interesting in talking about the compatibility, you know, and Bart touched on the fact that there's a bowling alley and a movie theater in the same complex as what we're proposing. And this, you know, a bunch of the different jurisdictions have gone through and have done crime analysis. You know, the city of Tempe is just changing their ordinance for the 3rd time. It just passed last week. I haven't watched it. They went past midnight. I haven't found the time to watch it yet of exactly what they ended up with. But the city of Tempe put this together. They compared the 2 dispensaries that are operating, the cultivation that's operating, the local pharmacies, and the liquor stores. And look at where all the crime is. Now, just to be clear, this is not crime at the location. They did a 1/4 mile buffer around the location. And they found, and again, this is, I completely plagiarized, taken from the City of Tempe staff report. I haven't touched this. I had nothing to do with the data collection, but the City of Tempe and their staff, when they went through their text amendment, showed that the regulations that are in place by DHS and by the owners and operators of the dispensaries have proven to be they're very, very safe environments. That the misconception that someone can just walk in and get the medicine is completely false. So, is it compatible by the movie theater and the movie theater and the bowling alley? I believe it is. It functions in a similar capacity as a Walgreens, which is at the same corner. It's a mix between a doctor's office and a pharmacy. Also, the bowling alleys and the movie theaters are not protected uses. When you go back and look at when the council actually did approve their medical marijuana dispensary ordinance, what was proposed to them by your staff was to keep it in industrial areas, to keep it away from commercial, to keep it away from Starbucks, movie theaters, bowling alleys, all those things. But your council at the time made a policy decision to include it in with these commercial. There is an assumption that these places where people gather will be there in the commercial zoning districts. So that was a decision made by your city council. Can it change? Absolutely. And that's at the purview of the council to change the protected uses, to change the zoning. But I think the crime stats by the city of Tempe are very telling of the fact that dispensaries and cultivation facilities have been operating very safely. Proposed use shall conform with the goals and policies of the general plan. Yes, it does. It complies, and your staff agrees with us. Proposed use shall conform with the development standards, shall take into account traffic design, all that. As Bart mentioned, the architect that we chose for this project has designed other buildings in Surprise Point. We will come back in front of you for the design. That was just kind of a mock-up. It will look and function just like any other pad in the retail complex. And demonstrate a need for the use. The CHA is 30,000 acres, and there's only one dispensary in it. And I would want to say, without sounding presumptuous, that this is a very, very well-run, safe, high-end dispensary that we look forward, if we're given the opportunity, to operating here. And we'll have adequate ingress and egress. Yes, again, we've got the infrastructure in place, and we look forward to working with your staff to develop the building. Adequate utilities, roads, yes. And no overburdening of services. So in closing, I'm coming forward with a recommendation of approval from your staff. We meet the zoning requirements. We meet the separation requirements. I've outlined the test. I believe we will not be detrimental to the community, and I respectfully request approval. Stand for any questions, as well as our entire team.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Before we have our commission ask or deliberate any issues here, this is a public hearing. I'd like to open that public hearing. If there's anyone that would like to speak on this matter, this would be the time to do so. Do we have anyone, Madam Secretary?
Larry Chaplin.
If you'd be kind enough to say your name for the record.
My name is Larry Chaplin. I'm a resident at Roseview community. It's saw on a map, which is fairly close to that location. There's a couple of concerns that I have. What was mentioned was that it was close to the bowling alley and close to the movie theater and the children in the facilities. We would think it's not such a big deal with a medical dispensary, but I looked up some of the history in some of the other states, and just for brevity, a few of the newspaper articles. As an example, Oregon, from September 28, 2015, so it was a little while ago, Oregon's medical marijuana dispensaries are getting ready for a watershed moment this week when recreational pot users will also be able to buy weed at their pot shops. More than 200 of Oregon's 345 medical marijuana dispensaries have notified the Oregon Health Authority of plans to sell recreational marijuana starting on Thursday. though some dispensaries may not qualify right away if they're still in the application process and haven't been approved, OHA spokesman Jonathan Modi said. Nevada, we just had an article in our own paper that talked about Nevada and was beginning to sell. Says licenses, well, article was May 8 of 2017. Licenses will be issued as early as July 1st. Licensed medical marijuana dispensaries in good standing with the state of Nevada can begin selling marijuana for recreational purposes as early as July 1st. Washington Liquor, we just moved down here from Washington, and so we saw what was going on with a new vote of the recreational marijuana at that location. Changing over some of these medical marijuana is going over to recreational. Now, this to me is a concern if that's the possibility because of the fact of the closeness to the residential area and also to the bowling alley and the movie theaters that are there. And we came close to voting for recreational here in Arizona. If that happens, can we be assured that they're not going to flip from medical marijuana over to recreational marijuana? I've talked with some of the representatives of the people that are moving in there, and they tell me that they cannot say that they will go to recreational marijuana. I infer from this that the plan would be to move to go to recreational marijuana. Do we want recreational marijuana in our location? And by the way, I was listening to some of the earlier reports about Al Green's. They moved down the road. They're on 99th. And according to their website, they said they moved and they have all their signs for medical, for the marijuana. So they are, in fact, still doing marijuana. And some of the pictures in there show their displays of marijuana. One of the things I was thinking about too is right now we have open areas that's in the in wide open for commercial use, and they say, yeah, this right now is a good location to move on in there. So what happens to other businesses that want to move into that area? Are they precluded from joining their positions or not? And also the thing too, they talk about the 30,000 acres in the CHA, which includes Surprise. 30,000 sounds like a lot, but when you start going into square miles, it's not that much. And the locations are close enough. Where are those going now that use medical marijuana? There have close enough locations. I don't think we need to have one in Surprise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Secretary, anyone else?
John Paul Carter.
I'd like to, I know I didn't state this, but we try to hold these to 3 minutes. If we could work with that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad he yielded 3 to me, so I'll total those up. Thank you, folks, for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. One of the concerns I'd like to just bring to the committee's attention is that we saw a crime statistical analysis between 3 separate focus areas, the pharmacies, the liquor stores, and the marijuana dispensaries. What I'd like to dive more in depth in that particular crime analysis is what is the comparison on number of facilities, liquor stores, and pharmacies compared to the number of dispensaries in the city of Tempe? Are we comparing a small number of dispensaries to a large number of liquor stores and pharmacies spread throughout the city in many different areas? Secondly, what is the historical data on that particular crime analysis, which is how long are we comparing the crime stats that have been occurring in or around the liquor store and pharmacies towards the dispensaries? The limited history that we have in Arizona of not only medical, but potentially future recreational marijuana is a very limited one. I'd like to just ask you to also consider that in the future, as the gentleman that just spoke before me, articulated very well, the consideration for a recreational dispensary is very real. One of the things that we have to look at in Oregon, Washington, California, and a number of other states that have legalized recreational marijuana is the crime statistics that have accompanied that, along with the impaired driving statistics that have accompanied that. There's been a surge in DUI impairment arrests related specifically to medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. There's been a surge in fatalities that involve marijuana impaired drivers. There's been a substantial cost in not only the healthcare community, the criminal justice community, and the education and awareness community that are affected by medical and legalized or recreational marijuana. Those statistics are something I'm not interested in seeing come into the city as Surprise. We're a flourishing city with growing transportation infrastructure that experiences congestion because there's a surge in population and business growth in this area. And that is something that we want to continue to see happen as citizens of Surprise. We'd like to see people who are engaged in developing our community in positive and effective ways through youthful development and leadership of all of the young folks that are in here. We're talking about putting a dispensary around a movie theater and a bowling alley, and restaurants where families, including mine, regularly go to eat and enjoy themselves recreationally. And I would challenge anybody to say that a medical marijuana dispensary with the potential to become a recreational facility in the future does not endanger all of the things that we hold dear as citizens of Surprise in a number of different ways. There'll be far-reaching impacts in the safety community, the economic, and the environmental aspect of this. So I would just ask you to consider that when considering this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask, I couldn't remember if you spoke your name.
It's John Paul Cartier.
John Paul Cartier. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone else?
No, we do not.
If there's anyone else that has a desire to speak, this would be the time to do so. Seeing none, then why don't we start with Commissioner Bash?
Thank you, Chair. I want to preface my comments by saying that I'm a retired Navy medical person. My wife is a nurse. I believe in medical marijuana. And I believe that it does those things that you said, Mel. The issue that I have is I believe the intent of the separation, the intent of that in the code, specifically pointing out playgrounds and schools. And we have children going to the bowling alley and the movie theater, and they are unsupervised. And Mel, you even pointed out that outside of the East Mesa facility, obviously on camera, you caught a patient selling his medical marijuana. So I think that's a compelling reason. That's my comments.
Thank you. Let me switch around. Commissioner Norberg.
I do have some questions, actually. Oh, I'm sorry.
Pull the mic down.
There you go. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I do have some questions. I was actually driving down Bell yesterday, and there was a gentleman standing outside with a sign that said, marijuana doctor. I'd like to know whether or not, if this were to pass, if there are going to be any signs that say anything about the building, the medical marijuana, or A-frame signs, anybody standing out there in that area where we're looking at.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I'd like to ask the applicant to come up and answer that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Norberg, we do not, my client does not do sign flipping, nor do we do A-frames or anything like that. We would request some tasteful signage. Part of our application said we would agree to no cannabis marijuana leaves none of that kind of traditional, what you may perceive as kind of the negative signage. It's Health for Life. We have a very, very tactful logo, and we could share that with you when we come through for the site plan review. But we'd request a sign for our business, Health for Life, but no sign flipping. If you wanted to put a restriction on A-frames, that it's acceptable to us. And we would also agree to a restriction with no marijuana leaves in our signage. It's not part of our logo.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would like to find out if we could add that into the stipulation, if it's possible, if this does pass.
I think, yeah, I was going to ask Mr. Wingard now, if this moves on, then we have a site plan that would come in that would also, we would be regulating the signage as well with the
Mr.
site
Chair,
plan?
that is correct. Part of the site plan review would be for signage.
Okay.
Chairman, Commissioner Norberg. So currently, the way the sign code is written, we do not allow A-frame signs. What was allowed for the time being for the 8 years was that we had a temporary sign program that the council has since repealed. And the new revision of the sign code, we're looking at the idea of allowing them, but they'd be in so many feet within front of the business. However, we have not gotten to that point or taken it from P&Z and council. With regard to sign walkers, those are a little bit different. Sign walkers, we have to allow by state law. There's actually specifically court cases and so forth that would allow those. We'd have to talk with legal specifically to see if that's something that we could condition. I'm not sure how that would go. But with regards to the A-frames themselves, they're currently not allowed by code.
Okay, however, if they were willing to not put it, even if it is legal, can we still have it included? I mean, because obviously you're saying that you're not going to. I just want to know, if you're not going to now, would that be, something that you would change later?
Correct. And Commissioner Norberg, I do not claim to be a sign expert, but there has been a lot of litigation over signs lately and what you can and cannot do. I think what Mr. Fitzer and your council may want to avoid is to put you in a situation, even if we agree to it, that could get you in trouble. I think, I'd actually love to have Donna here and get her opinion on it. I trust Donna. We work together in Mesa and here. I think if we agree to the condition that we're fine, but I wouldn't mind consulting with your legal counsel. And we agree to no sign flippers.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question, I think, is something that maybe Bart, you can answer. There is a lot of property around there that has yet to be developed. And so we've got Marley Park, the second phase, right across the street. And it looks like there is a residential area that is within the 1,500 foot distance from this, but nothing is there yet. Does that prevent a park from being put in? Or there's another one that's actually, can you go back one?
Oh, sure.
Without the red, because it's kind of covering up. There we go.
There.
That pad residential is 1,125 feet. And it says that a school, a daycare, parks, playgrounds, they have to be 1,500 feet away. Does that prevent that residential area from having a park? Or if somebody moves in, if they want to have an in-home daycare, does it prevent them from being able to do that? Or is that something that is allowed after the fact of a medical marijuana being built?
Commissioner, very good question. And there is a section of our code that allows, if something came in afterwards, that would not affect the buffering distance. So that's something could move in next to it that is within that distance.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So essentially, even if there was a daycare that wanted to go into some of these lots that are still available, they could essentially go there and be part of Surprise Point. Is that accurate?
Commissioner, that is correct.
Okay. And I do have a couple of other questions. I'm sorry, you might have to go back and forth here. I did have a question on the lobby. So I've never been in one either. Can anyone actually walk in and see the lobby, and then there's another area for them to go through, or are they not allowed in the front door at all?
So, through the chair, Commissioner, very good question. And they are set up a little differently. So this is Ron Emerson, and Ron has a background working at, I always get confused, CVS or Walgreens?
I worked for Walgreens for 25 years.
Walgreens for 25 years. So he can speak a little bit. The different dispensaries function different ways. In some, you have, well, I'll let Ron say, you have the man trap where you can't get over it.
It just depends on the area, because some that I'm working on in different areas, it depends on the area that it's going in. Because some of them you go up to the door and the door will actually be locked. And once they show their card to the person inside that's sitting at the desk, they'll be buzzed in. And then there's like a belfry, which is a secured area where we actually verify the card, the state card, before they're actually able to come into the lobby. They can have people in the lobby that are not patients if they're just waiting only. So you can have somebody come in, because I would rather have somebody wait in the lobby than sitting in the car waiting.
Right.
So that's kind of the thing. It's more secure inside of our buildings.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and to be clear, again, then so they're not back where the medication is actually dispensed, but they're just sitting in the lobby area. And in Gilbert, for a different client, the police department asked for that type of entrance. After the CUP was approved, after the building plans had already gone through, police department came in and said, actually, we'd really like the exterior door lock, show the card, do exactly what Ron just described, and the client put it in right there on the spot.
Okay. And in that lobby, there is nothing other than chairs. I'm assuming there's like
Chairs, that's it. And our menu's on the television screen.
Okay. Okay. And please bear with me. I do have possibly some other questions here. Oh, I know what it was. There was, as Larry Chaplin was talking about, the recreational issues. And as I was reading what I did read was that if it does become recreational, the current ones that are medical marijuana cannot be turned into a recreational. Is that accurate? Is that still current? Okay. Has Beth, on any of the other facilities that she has she turned any of her medical marijuana facilities into a recreational one where it was allowed?
Through the chair, Commissioner, yes. So she has dispensaries in Nevada, and they operate recreationally as well as medicinally. Here in Surprise, if it were to pass, then your city council will put forth a process, whether it's coming forward for another CUP, whether it's different separation requirements, whether it's different zoning. You know, the one thing that I want to make sure, and I hear the hesitation on recreation, and it's a totally different animal, but I want to make sure that we don't do something for a medicinal marijuana dispensary because we're afraid of what's going to happen, because the council has a lot of control. The council could just allow it in industrial. The council could increase the separation requirements, require another CUP process. But that will come down the road, and your council will have the right to regulate it the same way that they do from the medicinal purposes. So,
okay, great, thank you. And then let me get to my other notes here. You're lucky I'm not asking all the questions that I originally had. I actually did go back and watch the video of the council meeting on February 8th of 2011. I thought it was interesting that Councilwoman, our mayor, Walcott, thank you, I'm so sorry, our current mayor, I thought it was interesting that she was talking about how we had to have our zone put in place before the state came up with all their regulations. And I agree with her on, you've got to be kidding me, we have to make those decisions before we even know what the rules are going to be. But one of the things that Councilman Williams asked was about the taxes. And it was nonprofit, and that we would not make any money off that. So can you touch on that? Because from what I understand, there is money that the city will be receiving and that they are no longer nonprofit.
Through the chair, Councilwoman, I'm going to start, and Ron, if I am incorrect, because Ron knows a lot about the operation and the taxes. yes, we are taxed like every other business. So the whatever the state tax is, if we sell $100,000 worth of medicine, we are taxed, that 8.6%. I have researched and found out that 2.2% does go to the city. So absolutely. As far as the structure, and that was kind of part of Proposition 203, and that gets a little out of my wheelhouse just because I'm a land use lawyer, but there's a nonprofit that is the license holder. Then it has management companies that kind of own and operate the dispensaries. That said, every product, which the medicine that is sold, is taxed at the exact same rate as anything at Walgreens or at Starbucks, and it is a significant revenue stream for the city. And right now, if it doesn't locate in the city and it locates in the county or it locates in Sun City or wherever, then you miss out on that revenue stream if it's important to anyone.
Okay, I thought it was just really interesting that when Councilman Williams asked the question and the answer was you're not getting any, I was like, you got to be kidding.
Yeah, no, you get
So
you get
it's
your
good
share.
to know that we are going to be getting, if it passes. I was also concerned about this particular area, considering it's the only place in the city that our youth have to go to. Movie theater, arcade, bowling alley. But I also, in the video, there was a letter that was given to every member of council at the time in 2011 from a law firm, I think it was Rose Law Firm, that said they had a client looking at this particular spot here in Surprise Point, and council approved C2. I may not like the location. I like the way that it was explained about the other locations and how difficult it is to be able to put it anywhere else. As a council or as a member of this board here, my job is to really look at the voters. It passed by 4,340 votes. So when we're looking at, people are talking about this recreation, marijuana, and it failed by 1 or 2%. I'm not sure what that was, but it was very informative to be able to go back and watch that video. I thought it was great. So that is actually it on all of my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Coldham.
Well, first and foremost, for those that know me, and this commission knows me pretty well, before we ever consider any agenda item, it's just part of who I am. It's part of my makeup as a 25-year veteran of public education. I pretty much walk every possible step of area, look at things pretty detailed. And from my perspective, education is empowering. And so I have to thank Health for Life. I reached out to them and asked if they would give me an opportunity, and invited Commissioner Bash. We had the opportunity to tour the North facility and the East facilities. And one of the things that I initially liked a lot about both of the dispensaries is that their outlying laying feel. They were on the outskirts of Mesa on the north side as well as the east side. I liked that they were quieter areas. They weren't busy areas per se. So I really liked their proximity. But as I got closer, I have to just be truthful and say that concerns that I had about the security and the safety of the facilities, they were secured. Our ability to get into the lobby area, to come and arrive for our tour, the doors were locked. Somebody recognized that we were outside the door, and I think they recognized that we were the two guys here for the tour. So we had the opportunity to tour the north location and newer facility than the east facility, and as we went through, the professionalism of the staff, the facility and the layout of the deli layout of the showroom. It was a really a beautiful facility. In addition to that, I found everybody who worked within the facilities to be very professional, very focused. And from my perception, and again, I'm not an expert, But just based on my perception, I felt as though the place was operating very professionally and very well done. In addition to our tour of both dispensaries, we had the opportunity to tour the cultivation center where medical marijuana is grown. Very eye-opening experience, but again, to see the professional approach by those cultivators and growers and staff that were there. It was an impressive presentation. So I have to say to Health for Life, thank you very much for the opportunity for me to actually see for myself as a resident of District 6 and all of Surprise. For me, I need to see it. I need to be there. I need to, in essence, allow my hands to be in that environment. So thank you very much. I think just in general to my comments about the facilities, exemplary, very nice, very professional, very visible and viewable, and how they dealt with customers was top notch, excellent. To balance that, I will say that the last 2 weeks, I've had more phone calls, more emails, more people catch me in parking lots of grocery stores. And the communication of concerns that residents have had for me in all formats have been simply how it is that, give me just a second. Really, what I've heard from residents is for a site, a proposed medical marijuana site that's within 800 feet of entrances to Uptown Alley, as well as to AMC 14. That includes recreational activities for underage kids, families, unsupervised children. That include a bowling alley, a laser tag, billiards, sports theater, 80 plus video and prize games, and 14 movie theaters, family restaurants, and as a local educator, a place in Surprise where we have supervised and unsupervised teens and children under the age of 21 there all the time. So for me, I have to balance what the residents say as a father, what it is that I say. I'm not necessarily worried about my 4 children, but I do know there are unsupervised children that are there in that region. Really, the next factor for me was, again, taking a look at this chart that we've seen tonight during the presentation. As I look at the 500, the 1,000, the 1,500 linear feet distances between the proposed site and all of those different components, I had a hard time because sitting right next to that facility would be Uptown Alley, AMC 14, and a place where many unsupervised, thousands of unsupervised children are on a regular basis. So for me, I look at all of these details and ultimately, in spite of the incredible facilities and great job that they do, for me as a resident, I just feel like the proposed use does impair or affect really the integrity or character of our community, given it's right next to a family community area. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Well, I can speak that I think that I have no problem with medical marijuana facility. I think the city of Surprise needs one. I mean, obviously there's one on Bell Road. There are patients that need to go and don't need to go to 99th Avenue or to El Mirage. I do have concerns about the location. I wish there were more available locations because I think this facility is needed. I don't think it needs to be in an industrial area because it's a cash business. And a lot of the people who use medical marijuana are elderly. They don't need to be driving out there with a pocket full of money to buy medicines I'm kind of torn. I think that a facility is necessary in the city. I'm not sure that this location is the best. It might be the only one. I'm not sure. So I have mixed feelings. That's all the comments I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenbaum.
I want to thank the applicants. This has been a very educational evening between paint and I also viewed the 2011. Spent a couple hours with that, and then I reviewed the original 2035 plan that was approved by the voters in surprise. And so a lot of my questions have already been answered, but I would be, I have a couple of them. Would this facility be fronting on the parking lot or the street? Or the intent?
Through the chair, Commissioner Rosenbaum, it would be in the parking lot. That'd be the front.
With signage also on the street? Probably.
Yeah, we are not there yet, but obviously we'd have to meet the sign code and come back for you in front of that.
I tried to go through, and in going through the video and then looking at the minutes of that meeting in 2011, there were a couple things that were cited. One was they talked about California, and they talked about increases in three things: increased pedestrian and auto traffic in the area where those were located, an increase of criminal activity, and a loss of trade to surrounding businesses. Now, this was 2011, and admittedly, there are things that have changed. We have a much broader experience at this point. But those were some concerns I had. Also, the general plan basically asks us to ensure that new developments should conform with existing specialized uses or the community character. And so I have the same considerations that my fellow commissioners do, that in an entertainment area is probably not where I would place this. I have nothing against, I'm looking at this as a medical facility. The only other thing that we have there is we do have a drugstore, which sells much more than drugs, but there aren't any other medical things within that facility, within that entertainment center, and so that's a concern that I have. I think that there's a need for the product. I just wish we had another choice of places to put it. But in watching the discussion, it appears as though we had 6 of them in the area. 3 of them were along Grand Avenue, and this was in 2011, and so they're not necessarily available now. And then there were 2 of them that were not there. One, I believe, was this one was one of them, and it was probably, if you're interested in the central location for our existing population, that's probably the place. But I do have a lot of reticence because of where it's located, not what it is.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one comment just in response? Yes. The only thing I'd like to add, we will also agree to a stipulation to have that secure entrance where you're not even allowed in without showing a card and having that double door, because I do hear that. And I've got 3 kids. We agree to making it a very secure location, and I hear you. It would be great to have other locations. We'd love to go along Grand, but you can't go anywhere along there because of that R43 along the railroad tracks. So we agree to a stip, Eric, if the commission chooses to move forward, because I hear that security being a big problem, and it's important to us too.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few comments, and that I personally feel that medical marijuana has a very good purpose. I think it helps a lot of very needy people, and I'm very much in favor of it. However, there are other concerns that I have to also consider, and I know that Mrs. Shuby mentioned the criterion that we have to evaluate. And we got to evaluate the location and the character use shall be in harmony with the surroundings. And the second one, I think that's prominent, is the location is poses that it shall not impair the integrity or character of the community, nor shall it be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare of the city. Well, there are other criteria that also has to be considered. That's our primary focus. And when I listen to the other commissioners and their concerns related to public safety and health and location, I also have an opinion. One of my concerns is that the public safety portion of this is that the reviewing agencies, at least on the information that we've been provided, lacks or fails to include any local law enforcement opinion or evaluation. I know a few years ago that we had a white paper from California, and understanding that California has been in this business for quite some time, and that white paper was put together by the police chiefs of California, county by county. And they felt so compelled about the use of medical marijuana that they actually put a paper together as a group. Part of that information, I certainly don't want to share it because it's a rather thick, compelling piece of work. And it is an older piece of work that was published in 2009. You got to remember that California had already been involved for a number of years. And as Arizona is new to this considerably, that time sometimes creates certain conditions. This white paper in 2009 indicated the majority of medical marijuana dispensaries after a few years, I'm not saying that's going to happen here because laws have changed, we got more familiar with how to deal with these activities, but the activities that actually took place in California, after a few years, were owned and operated by gangs, cartels, and other associated drug dealers. In addition, they hired their own doctors who wrote prescriptions to enhance their businesses. That concerns me because the evidence of that, I think, is fairly clear. That because of the direct, there is a direct, what we call inverse proportional relationship between the age of the patient and for medical treatment and for the age of the treatment for medical marijuana treatment. The white paper shows that the majority of medical treatment is provided to people, I think, I'm not sure the exact number, but somewhere between 55 and 60 and older, that used up the majority of all medical treatment health care. Well, looking at medical treatment for medical marijuana, that from the ages of 17 to 45 years old, that there was 80% of the medical marijuana treatment provided through dispensaries were for youngsters, I should say young people, everybody's young to me now, from 17 to 45. And even more pronounced is that from age 17 to 30, it was 52% of all the medical marijuana treatment that was provided due to scrupulous doctors and people owning these businesses. Not to say that that's going to happen here, but it is compelling to know that it can happen. In addition to this disproportionate relationship in public with the youth, demonstrates both the primary and ancillary crimes in the direct areas in, at, and around the dispensaries, premises, and the surrounding areas. The evidence of white paper shows that a history of crime, drug dealers, unsavory individuals who prey on patients, the dispensaries, and surrounding areas, try to sell drugs, using drugs, committing crimes against innocent people, they actually had a name that they had attached to this. I think it was the dispensaries are described as a crime magnet. Now, granted, this is new to our city, it's newer to Arizona, and the people that you have introduced us to in terms of running this operation seem to have an impeccable background and great integrity. But at the same time, I have to be concerned about this location. The location must be determined if it's suitable location for a dispensary, considering the location is described as an entertainment district, even though there's no technical term for entertainment districts. I think if you asked the people of Surprise, they would look at the bowling alley and the theaters as an entertainment district. And it appears from the restaurants and other types of activities that seem to flourish there, that it will continue to be that and even expand. That with this, it attracts a large gathering of people and crowds of all ages. In addition, while looking at and questioning this type of activity in this location, I found, and actually it's a therapy program, a private therapy program run right probably with less than 500 feet from this applicant's proposal, that is called Team for Kids. And it's a private therapy service. And the concern I have is it's all preschoolers, and they serve approximately 100 students a day. And so technically it's not a school, but while it's not technically a school, the Team for Kids provides therapy services associated with educational institutions such as schools. And I think the intent of the ordinance is to protect children from gathering places such as schools, parks, churches, and potentially there may be a change in the ordinance of entertainment centers as well. These concerns, as I looked at it, is I think the commissioners must determine if this location is suitable for a dispensary. It would appear from the questions and concerns arise from the commission, it's my opinion, and I have to act alone on my own conscience about how to vote, that this general site would not be in harmony with the surrounding areas, and it would provide and possibly provide the impact of a general health concern and safety of our citizens. While I don't want to appear as an alarmist, I also would like to be a realist that things like this can happen, have happened, and potentially, if we do not guard against the safety of this environment, will happen here. So the location of the dispensary is a real issue. And I have, from one of our reports, from a neighborhood meeting that was held on May 17th, that Ms. Shuby responded, I want to get you on your own words here, tell me if it's wrong, that there are few remaining available sites in the city, which to me implies that there are other sites available. That may or may not be true at this point, but if this conditional use permit is denied, I'd suggest that the applicant consider one of these other sites. Now, I don't know if there's any other responses from, it is an open public hearing that still continues. If there's anyone else that would like to speak, then before we continue to deliberate, if any, then you're welcome to come to the microphone. Yes, we have one.
Yes, I'd like to just.
Could you please state your name again? Thanks.
Again, my name is Mel McDonald. I
Thank
addressed you earlier today. Commissioner Bash, in response to your question about the time that they cooperated, perhaps I didn't make it clear. Any person that goes in the dispensary, there are video cameras all over the place. And when the person buys the drug, they can get them and those tapes are saved. The person that left didn't sell it out in the parking lot. It was another location, but the product, the sales materials are on that. And it was learned that this person had actually bought the contraband out in another location. And when we learned about that, that is when the offer was made. The studies on that, and I have appeared to a number of councils, for example, in Fountain Hills, the cameras to those dispensaries, those are the most well-protected place that you're going to find in this town. Cameras inside and outside of the dispensaries. In fact, in Fountain Hills, the calls to the police, there were two of them. One of them, they were inside with the cameras and noticed a wandering child and called the police. In another, there was a burglary in an adjoining property, and the video cameras were used to capture that. As to the concern of the location, how it might appear to the public, for those of you that have been out at East and North, this is not, as one would picture, a place that draws attention. I've been to the dispensary in Gilbert. I had trouble finding it. I couldn't, if I hadn't have known the name, it's not out there. And kids that go by, if they're going to a movie or something, unless somebody has told them, they're not going to be able to identify that or recognize that as a medical marijuana place. In Gilbert, I was there when the chiefs of police appeared in the town council there and made a discussion that this was very positive. As to the tax revenues, there are tens of thousands of dollars that are generated. When we look in the area of hypotheticals, and it's interesting, by profession, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I represent a lot of people that have done a lot of things. Probably one of the most dangerous drug locations you'll ever find is a Walgreens, with the OxyContins and the other products that are used to be made. Anybody can take a legitimate, lawful product and make that product into something that can be a crime. And it used to be that Walgreens would have a lot of the components that could make crystal meth out there until they realized what was happening. In the medical marijuana field, the protections there, the securities there are 10 times, 20 times more than you're going to find in a Walgreens store. I guess at the end of the day, when you look at the choice, yeah, ideally, and I understand it because I was the voice of the drug war in the 1980s. This is medicine, not drugs. Might marijuana initiatives pass in the future? It could pass. People asked me to endorse it last time, and I said, hell no, I'm not going to lend my name to that. I want it for the medical purposes. And if it ever became legalized, if there was recreational out there, you folks are clearly going to have a voice into what's that happen. But I would hope that the maybes or the what ifs don't govern the decision. There are people, I've known and I've talked to some of the scientists in this field. This is an emerging technology in Israel. Israel is one of the great countries that are making some of these scientific breakthroughs. These products, this cannabis, has definite value. And there's elderly people in this community that shouldn't have to drive miles and miles. I am confident that somebody going to a movie isn't going to suddenly be detracted. Kids that might be out there unsupervised aren't even going to know unless somebody told them what is on the other side of the door. And as much as they'd like to look there, they're not getting in without a card. And then the last point, you say, well, sometimes there were figures, sometimes younger people do it. I'm the first to tell you that, of course, you're going to find flaws in a system. You're always going to find people that get the prescription that probably shouldn't have happened. And that's one of the things I admire with DHS. They have really done a vigilant job. Out in Scottsdale, I'm friends with Dustin Johnson, who runs that dispensary. And we're sitting out there one day and saw the people with wheelchairs, with arthritis, with cancer, that are going there to get their product. this is a medicine, and I know that I have an idea of how difficult this search is, and it's always easy to say, well, let's shoot it another place or let's do something else. Maybe we can find another. The truth of the matter is they followed it to the T. It's here and now. And I would hope for the patients out there, the elderly, the epileptics like my son, the people with brain damage, with cancer, they shouldn't have to drive. Just like Walgreens, if you need pain pills and the doctor's prescribed it, the guy that takes that pill may give it to some kids and commit some crimes. But the people that are running this dispensary, Miss Stavola, these folks are committed and the people there are trained. And I think for any concerns you have, you can take it to the bank that if anybody is messing with the law, they would be the first to turn them in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Yes.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Okay, I'm Reverend Cheryl Hawkins, but I'm for pot. I think I understand the purpose of it. I understand it helps people when they're ill. I voted for it. I don't have any issues with it, but I don't want it where I think that area, if I understand my community, that may be the main community for children. We have a lot of activities going up there for our children. So yeah, sell the marijuana, but I don't think it needs to be in that spot when everybody said, we got a lot of kids up here. We got a lot of kids doing things. I'm sorry, I don't have any kids, but from my recollections, children are not ignorant. They will know what it is. They will know what that building is. I'm not against it. I just don't think it needs to be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes.
Thank you, members. Again, I won't take much time. I've been listening here to a number of the factors that have been presented, and albeit there'll be revenue streams of potentially around 2% to the city, if there's any in-depth analysis done on the California, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado areas, one can clearly see that at many of the disciplines that I've already highlighted earlier, included the health industry, school, and therapy programs, rehabilitation programs, great amounts of money have been actually exceeding the tax revenues that any of these local municipalities or states have received from medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. That's a fact. DUI rates, as I stated earlier, have skyrocketed in those areas. These are facts. NHTSA has published studies on this. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Impairment arrests have gone up. Those are facts. Those are things that are occurring. Those are things that are real. California has estimated the cost-benefit ratio of legalized marijuana, which started with recreational marijuana, which has been cited in the Chiefs of Police report that was mentioned earlier. The cost value was approximately over $3 billion compared to the revenue intake on that of just over $1 billion. So the reality is, when we're talking about taking money into the city, that's fine, but there's a very real cost when we start having to impair our criminal justice system, elevate arrests, respond to traffic collisions and fatalities. One lawsuit by an impaired driver can stem into the millions for the city, okay? So we have to be very careful correlating that. As the lady just presented there before me, children are not ignorant. They're going to know very quickly in the city of Surprise, this is a small community, what that dispensary is and what it does. I've been out there on Friday nights. There's hundreds of kids out there. They're standing around. They're in front of those stores buying ice cream from Cold Stone, going to the bowling alley. They're not going to be ignorant to what's going on. If we invest in this, it's really not a wise decision. Correlated to that, all of the statistical categories for marijuana use in the lower age bracket range, ranging from high school and grammar school age students through middle-aged adults, has gone up substantially in all of the states that I've mentioned previously. Those are facts. Those are published by DOT, public health and wellness groups, government agencies. Ask the political figureheads in Colorado how they feel about the tax streams coming in from this and the criminal prosecution element that they've had to do. These are real people that have lived it and have been quoted in public media forums and professional reports and journals against this particular proposal. We're not going to be worried about people inside the facility. It's in this company's best interest to run a secure, professional facility with a good reputation. They're a business. Nobody's worried about 18-year-old kids or 16-year-old kids breaching their facility and getting into the grow area. What we're talking about is an uncontrolled environment once those purchasers leave the facility and are exposed to public domain, which they're not going to have control over. That's where you're going to be contacting kids. That's where you're going to have vehicle operators using the streets and the parking lot. That's where all the families are at the restaurants and social media or social entertainment areas over there. That's what we're concerned about. I don't think anybody's arguing that they're going to run a very well locked down facility. So please keep that in mind as you continue your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Bill Thompson. I didn't come here tonight for the marijuana thing. I came here for, my wife and I came here for the rental properties possibly being built on Waddell and Reams. And I've been listening to all this, and I only have one experience with this medical marijuana issue. And that comes from where we lived prior to moving back to Arizona. My wife and I lived in Maine, and we lived on a rural country road. And the medical marijuana was legalized. Found out about half a mile from us, there was a guy who was legally growing marijuana for medical use. We also heard that one night or one day from our neighbors, this guy came down the road with a gun. Turns out some teenage kids had busted into his backyard growing area and stolen some plants. And he came looking for them with a gun. I'm not saying that this proves anything or is actually relevant to this situation. I'm just expressing that this is one and only personal experience I've had with medical marijuana. And quite frankly, I don't think it's a very good location either. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, then I'll close the public hearing. Is there any further comments that the commission would like to make?
I actually have a question I forgot to ask. If this does pass, can you tell us what your hours of operation are going to be?
9 to 7. Oh, because you don't regulate.
It's 9 to 8. 9 to 8.
Yes, our proposed hours of operation are 9 to 8.
9 to 8.
I had to ask that all the different jurisdictions, the pleasure of working in land use, I get every jurisdiction, they all have different hours, but our proposed hours are 9 to 8.
Is that something that is open to being changed? If the council, I'm sorry, not the council, the commission were to approve? I mean,
For shorter hours?
right, correct.
Yep.
You know, I know that there's a lot of, obviously, like everyone is talking about, it's the location that we're concerned about because there's the movie theater, the bowling alley, you know, the recreation area for our youth. What would you be open to instead of 8 p.m., for example, on Fridays and Saturdays, maybe 6 p.m., since, you know, a lot of our kids are going out there at night and people are concerned about that. Okay. Thank you. That was my only other question.
Any other question
Commissioner?
from the commission?
That's a 7-day-a-week operation?
Yes.
No further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Wingard, for your presentation. Considering all the input that we have at this time, I would entertain a motion.
I move to deny a conditional use permit for Health for Life medical marijuana dispensary located on the northeast corner of Litchfield Road and Soledad Street because of the location.
Second.
Can you clear the the voting screen for the button, because apparently someone's pushed their button already? We're having a technical glitch here. Please be patient with us. It's still stuck. We could take a roll call vote, sir, if we can't get it straight. Please bear with us. If we can't do it this way, we'll do it by voice. Okay. Would you please then let's reiterate the motion. The motion is to deny this location. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded, and maybe we can do roll call to have her vote. Yeah.
Commissioner Norberg,
Against?
Commissioner Colton.
Before we go on, I want to make for sure that we have it clear here that the motion is to deny the location. The for this would be to deny it. Against would be to approve, or not approve, but basically not to approve the motion. So I just want to make that clear before we vote. Okay?
Mhm.
So we have your vote.
Okay, so would you like me to do it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Commissioner Norberg,
Against?
Commissioner Colton.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Yes. Chair Chapman,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenbaum,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Against.
Commissioner Bash.
Against.
Okay, so we have
Um,
3-3.
uh,
So it's someone, go ahead. It's 3 against and 3-4.
Okay. I think that I'm a little bit confused of if the motion was to deny this, and the person that made the motion denied it. was against it. I think
It was an error.
it was an error. Okay.
I vote for
Excuse
the
me,
motion.
can I hear the vote, because I'm not understanding it, I apologize, I don't.
It's confusing, and we'll reiterate it. Is that the vote, because of the way the motion was provided, that the motion was to be against granting this applicant for this dispensary at this location. So a vote in this case for that would mean that it would be denied. A vote against it would mean that they would be for it. So I know it's confusing, but if everyone feels comfortable with their vote, I know that we have one person that made the motion that,
Wrongly voted.
okay, he would like to make it clear what his vote is then.
I'm for denial.
Okay,
I am for denial.
Okay,
that would be yes. So if we could then have you give us the results, please.
So we have 5 in favor, 4 in favor, and 2 against.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your applicant. Let's hope that you can find a more suitable location for it. I think you would have support if you could do that. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item. Item number 3 is a consideration and action on a major PAD amendment to the Cotton Gin Planned Area Development, PAD, to allow multifamily residential as permitted land use on 10.8 acres approximately parcel located on the northeast corner of Waddell Road and Reams Road. We have presenter Sergio Angulo, planner. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now, before I get started with this presentation, if you could see on the agenda items, this item and the next item are, are related to the same project. With your permission, I'd like to go through a presentation and explain both of those items under one presentation, if that's okay with everyone.
That would be fine. Thank you. We will vote on them separately, but you can present the presentation. Okay.
Thank you. So this case, the first part of it is a major PAD amendment to the existing Cotton Gin PAD. So here's the vicinity for that site. So this is located on the northeast corner of Reams Road and Waddell Road. Here's a close-up of the site. It's a 10.8 acres vacant lot adjacent to a residential community known as Santa Elena, which is all part of that same Cotton Gin PAD. South of Waddell Road, across the street, you have the Bashes development in Marley Park. To the west, you have the Tash residential subdivision and some existing commercial, some vacant commercial lots right there just adjacent to the west of this property. This is the existing zoning of the site and the surrounding sites. So as mentioned, this is part of the Cotton Gin PAD. Now, currently, this parcel under the PAD is designated as a commercial land use with allowed for C2 uses. To the north and to the east, you have single-family residential. To the west, across Reams, you have a hard zone community commercial. And to the south, Marley Park PAD with commercial land uses, and also some single family to the southeast there with Prosado and their mixed use development to the southwest. As explained here, so this is the entire Kangen plant area development. 10.8 of those acres of that site is currently zoned for commercial. And with all the single family residential development there, it currently has a density of 3.1 dwelling units per acre. In the general plan, the land use designated is as a neighborhood character area, which allows a density of between 2 to 8 dwelling units per acre in a suburban neighborhood such as the Kangen. So this is part of that proposed PAD amendment, is to allow multifamily residential as a permitted use within that commercial parcel on the northeast corner of Reams and Waddell Roads. That would increase the overall density for Kangen to 4.23 dwelling units to the acre, which still fits within the allowed density from the general plan. Now, given that the site is not changing completely to multifamily at this point, there is a statement within this PAD amendment that would, if this PAD amendment application is approved, would prohibit any commercial uses once this is fully developed as the proposed multifamily development. So let's say one of those units will not be able to turn into some sort of retail or commercial use. It would be strictly residential multifamily. Now, given that this is a unique product, the applicant is also proposing new development standards for this multifamily use. In this case, here's a comparison of the existing development standards for the commercial development and what the applicant is proposing. So the north setback, which is buffered by a collector street, currently has a setback of 20 feet for commercial, given the fact that this is going to be now more of a residential use. It's the applicant is proposing 10 feet. And same thing on the east side, which is also buffered by a landscape tract and a collector street as well. Now on the west and on the south, which is where the arterials are located, the applicant is proposing a 20-foot setback, so keeping those units further away from the arterial. Maximum building height is currently at 45 feet for any commercial development that can, at this point, be developed on that site. The proposed development standards for a multifamily use will bring that down to 25 feet for their leasing office and 18 feet for the rental units themselves. So the applicant's trying to keep this as specific as possible to this type of product for this location. A landscape setback, currently there isn't one, and the applicant is proposing an 8-foot setback, landscape only setback for on all three sides, so the north, the west, and the south side. Now on the east side, the reason why you see a 0-foot setback there is because there is an existing landscape tract and a collector road that buffers the east side from the rest of the single-family homes. So you can see minimum open space will remain at 25% for this site. Now, the PAD amendment requires a citizen outreach meeting. The applicant had their first citizen outreach meeting earlier this year in January. It was a very well attended meeting by the neighbors of the site. From what the applicants were able to count from the sign-in sheets, there was a little bit over 175 people that signed in. Honestly, there was probably even more at that meeting. But at first, the main concerns was the fact that this multifamily proposed development would, one, take away the commercial that's on that corner. So that was one big item. Another big item that was brought up at that first citizen outreach meeting was the increased traffic on Ludlow. And let me just back up a little bit. So Ludlow is the collector that runs just north of the site, and it kind of turns down south to, I believe it's 153rd, I don't recall. So this actually acts as a collector through the site, kind of connecting traffic from Waddell and to Reams in and out of this neighborhood. So currently, the residents are experiencing that there's a very high traffic volume on Ludlow. So that item came up at this meeting. Also, with the increase in units on this site would also increase traffic on both Waddell west of Reams. So Waddell west of Reams is currently just improved along the north side, given the fact that the south side of Waddell, has not been developed yet. So that was another issue. Now, with the first impression that this gave out to the residents, they first thought that when they heard a multifamily, it was going to be a big multi-story apartment complex. So that's one thing that they didn't want, and they voiced that pretty heavily at this meeting, and also any type of increase in crime rates that could possibly come with an apartment complex. Now, the applicant was able to take notes, and as part of the packet, you guys saw the notes and that were written off that meeting. So they thought it was beneficial to have a second outreach meeting to come back to the community after they addressed some of their concerns after going through the first design review, both with their staff and with city staff. And we'll go over that once we get into the next part of the site plan. So just to recalc, on that second citizen outreach meeting, there was a much less turnout from the residents. There was about 27 people that signed in. The people that did show up saw the changes that the applicant made to the site and the design and the layout, and they were appreciative of that. Now, there were still some concerns in regards to traffic, both on Ludlow but specifically more towards that west side of Reams, and what the increase of units here would do to that traffic. The applicant was able to explain that once Prasada develops that south side of Waddell, then that would be a full street, and some of those issues would be taken care of then. So with that, for the PAD amendment portion of this application, staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend approval to the mayor and city council. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the site plan. So when the applicant did their first submittal for staff to review, this was the site plan that they provided to us. So they first proposed 133 units with one main entrance, both ingress and egress off of Waddell Road. and one exit only on that north side to Ludlow. Also, their open space was remained centered, and that was one of the things that we heard from that first citizen outreach meeting, was that the residents felt that the applicant was not providing enough open space for the tenants that would be living in this area, and they were afraid that they were going to use the community's park, which is owned and maintained by the HOA. So the applicant went back, did some site modifications, and this is what they came back with to their second citizen outreach meeting. And this is the latest site plan that they are proposing. So they brought down the unit count to 127 units. This will include 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, and 3-bedroom units. The 1-bedroom units are actually duplexes, so they're attached, and the 2- and 3-bedroom units are detached single-standing units. They're providing both covered parking, some uncovered parking, and some parking within garage structures. And as you can see, their main entrance remains off of Waddell Road. Their secondary access point, which is remains still exit only, has now been shifted to Reams Road on the west side of the property. This would be a ride-in and ride-out. A ride-out only, and the only vehicles that would have access into the site from that access point would be emergency vehicles. Now, in addition to the pedestrian access off of that main entrance off of Waddell, the applicant is also proposing a pedestrian access off of the corner of Waddell and Reams to activate that intersection, and also one off of that exit only access point onto Reams. Now, going back to the open space and recreation area, the applicant increased their open space. They actually included a playground, tot lot. This also includes a pool, some barbecue, seating, shaded areas as well. And it also now includes a dog park for the residents. This is just showing you where those gates are located. So past these gates, the general public will not have access unless they are tenants. Now, obviously, emergency vehicles will have access through these gates through our Knox box. This is their proposed landscape plan. As you can see, there will be adding the required landscaping along Reams Road and Waddell Road. Also continuing that sidewalk, which is not existing at this point, but along the south side and north side of Reams, it will connect to those existing sidewalks to the adjacent developments. One additional item. Now, each individual unit will have a small private backyard, and the applicant will be including a tree and some landscaping for those individuals as well, in addition to their open space and community area at the center of the site. This is just a close-up of how those units will potentially be laid out. So as you can see, they each have their own small private backyard with landscaping. This white structures are the garage structures, and these gray are the covered parking areas. Now, this is a proposed wall plan. Now, one thing that I'd like to mention on this is that the side that is on the east side that faces the existing residential development will be view fencing instead of just an all complete masonry block fence. That way, it not only the residents that will be using this, that will be living in this development along that side will have some sort of view to that landscape track, but it also provide some sort of viewing to that pedestrian pathway that's been created along that area.
Excuse me, can you repeat that? Where was the view fence?
It is along the east side. So the side that faces the existing single family residential development.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
That's I'm wrong.
That would be east, and there's an existing wall there.
Mhm.
It says existing. It says
Right over here.
existing builder to remain.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah, it's there. And it's along London too. All of these residents are against the front.
Do we have the architect here that might be able to
Yes,
shed some light
the
on that?
applicant is here with his design group as well.
If there's someone that could speak to this, it'd be appreciated. Would you please state your name for the record?
Chairman, members of the commission, Brendan Race, 702 East Osborne, here on behalf of the applicant. That along our east and north property line is an existing wall. We are not proposing any changes to any existing wall. That is a solid wall that is to remain such. We're a little bit confused as to why the symbols are the way they are on that plan, but I can assure the commission and the residents that there is no plans for a view fence along our eastern boundary.
Okay, thank you.
Now, with that said, we could add an additional stipulation to assure that stays that way. I proceed, sir.
Okay, so
Thank you.
is that the end of your presentation here?
I still have just a couple more
Okay,
slides to go
all
through.
right, thank you.
So here's the proposed signage right there on the lower right-hand side of your screen with the fencing that the applicant is proposing. Now, these are the proposed elevations for the units. So this shows the one-bedroom units. Like I said, there'll be duplexes, attached units. This would be the two-bedroom unit and the proposed three-bedroom unit. So you can see this will all be single-story, and to make sure that stays that way. That's why the reason for those proposed development standards from the PAD amendment. Now, this right here gives you an idea of what that parking garage will look like. Still following the same design theme as the residential units themselves. Now, sorry, with that staff recommendation is of approval of the site plan, subject to stipulations A through F, and we could add that additional stipulation in regards to the fencing on the east side of the property.
Okay, thank you. Before any comments from our commissioners, this is a public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing for anyone that would like to speak, and I would entertain that we would both speak on item number 4 and 5 as it relates to the same project.
Okay.
Is there anyone that we have that would like to speak?
Yes, Reverend Cheryl Hawkins.
This is the Reverend Cheryl Hawkins show. Okay. I don't like the idea of this these apartment buildings coming into my community. I think there's a different consciousness of people that own their own home and people that rent. And when I bought my property, it was not with any idea that walking distance from my property, and I don't walk a lot, would be apartment buildings. And I think that when this company or these people came here to present this, I don't have a lot of confidence in them since they came with a program and a project showing me stuff that wasn't accurate. So number one, I'm not feeling real homey and good about that they didn't even know it was a wall there. They're gonna do, I don't like it. So I hope that you vote the way I think you would vote if you lived where I live and these apartment buildings were gonna be this close to you. That's what I asked of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have any other persons that would like to speak?
Lisa Terr.
Is it Lisa? Okay. Would you please state your name for the record?
I'm sorry, Lisa Terr, and I'm a resident of Santa Elena. I attended the first, and I believe it was the second meetings with the developer. The first one was very heated, but when we came back, everything we had asked for, they had done. They closed off the entrance to Ludlow. They no longer had a pedestrian walkway to our park. They made their own park. Today, my husband and I visited their facility in Goodyear, and it's top notch. Landscape to the hilt. The clientele was good. They took us inside to view. They didn't know we were coming. The gal met us at the office, very professional, took us in. The buildings were, with the surrounding area, everything blended. It was very nice. She took us inside. They were top notch. They're like executive. They're geared towards executives. We saw clientele. What did I want to? We discussed, because my husband and I own rental properties, we discussed their policy for renting, and it also leaves no stone unturned. Nobody's getting in that isn't responsible. And I'm all for it. I don't want to end up with a strip shopping center that dumps into our community and other communities cutting through ours to get to it and not knowing what's going to be in there. You know, if it was Sprouts, I'd be all for it, but I doubt it. I've called them. Anyways, thank you.
Do you have anyone else?
Julie Helms.
Julie, would you?
Hi, thank you, Julie Helms. I'm also a resident in Santa Elena. At first, I was one of the group that was totally against this complex and went door to door and created quite an issue for our developers here with my hit list of things that needed to be changed that we insisted on being done. Very grateful that everything we asked for was done. I do still have a couple small concerns with traffic and how they do have Ludlow positioned for egress and in and out of the property. It's just logical that Ludlow is going to continue to be a problem for traffic coming in and out, cut through. And we have spoken with the police, we've spoken with the city, we have spoken with anybody that'll listen to us. And so I'm hoping that somehow it can be further addressed. It's definitely a safety issue with our park there. We did spend a little bit of time looking up reviews for this company, and there's several really wonderful reviews on the internet. There's also equally as many people that are unhappy. I would hope that one of our big concerns with this community is it's coming in high end, that somehow it can be maintained high end. As times change and economics change in communities and areas, we just hope that somehow there's a way that this will always remain a high-end community, that somehow it won't, if things get tough, become lower and lower and lower, that we end up with further issues as whether it be crime and coming with the lower end rental, you tend to have more noise, more just community problems. And we just want to see that hopefully avoided. Everything that they have asked for from us, we've tried to comply and vice versa. So I think, we're all on the right path. Me personally, I would rather know what's going in and have some control over it versus the unknown. But there's still a few unknown things that need to be looked after. And Reams is a busy road. Waddell is a busy road. Waddell going west is a busy road. High traffic, high accident intersection. Ludlow is going to be a problem. We have already had a child hit on that road. So hopefully maybe somebody can work with traffic and improve how they're directing in and out. So that's our big issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that'd like to speak?
Joe Carl.
Good evening. My name's Joe Carley. I live in Santa Elena for about 10 years. Let me first go on record say I'm not nearly as polished as the people before me that spoke, so bear with me. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could look 10 years down the road and see whatever decision is made here today and see how it played out and get on board one way or another, but I can't. So the only thing I can do really is state what I think is fact. Next Metro, I went to the first meeting. The second meeting, I was out of town. I could not attend. Next Metro had a great lawyer, Brennan. High dollar lawyer, did a fantastic job listening to the homeowners and their concerns. And they went even to as far as to make adjustments to appease some of our concerns. But what he did also at that meeting, at that first meeting, he did a fantastic job putting the fear and the doubt into the homeowners, of what could be on that property. And he did an excellent job. He earned every penny of his hourly rate. I'm sure that's an industry practice because he succeeded, because we have less people here today. I have a hard time getting on board to rezone something where a developer is going to profit. I have a problem with that. I would hope you would too. Currently, we have luxury rentals, in quotes, already going up on Litchfield and Greenway. I'm not sure how that'll play out. Marley Park is fighting it. They're already zoned for it, so I don't see how they're going to not have that happen. So we really don't know what the occupancy rate is or long-term effect. And that's really one of my biggest concerns with this company. The concept's been around for a while, but Next Metro is pretty new to the game. What happens in 5 or 6 years? Do they exit the market after recouping their investment and profit? Where does that leave us? Don't know. These type of complexes are a fad. It's new. It's new and exciting. Next Metro states on their website that millennials are their bread and butter tenant. I'm not seeing many millennials here in Surprise earning the type of money to substantiate their price point. We have no big corporate businesses here that attract millennials who would afford the money required to live in these luxury rentals. I did some research on current Next Metro complexes currently up and running. there are some good reviews, but there are also a lot of negatives, and they outweigh the positives. Tenants are concerned and complaining about lack of on-site management, general upkeep, timely maintenance repairs. Insufficient parking is a huge problem. Poor quality materials to build these luxury rentals. It was even noted that a few tenants withheld rent to get repairs completed to only find out they were being evicted. It's clear the negatives outweigh the positives. As they say, you can put lipstick on a pig, but at the end of the day, it's still a pig. And then there's the ongoing traffic issue. Next Metro presented a traffic study that I believe was 10 plus years old. A little outdated and certainly not in tune with today's standard or current traffic patterns. And I'm not sure if the city has done their due diligence conducting any recent studies on how this project would impact Reams and Waddell, a very problematic intersection. Yes, they did eliminate the exit on Ludlow, but I don't think it will prevent tenants from coming through our development and speeding by or possibly speeding by our playground where our children are. Hopefully some of these concerns will provide you the ability to make a good, positive decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak?
Pete Selchicki. Shalachi.
How you doing? Peter
Thank you.
Szilagyi, I live
If
in
you would
Santa-
get up to the mic then, that'd be great, and speak.
Peter Szilagyi, I live in Santa Lena.
Thank you.
You know, their development is nice. I've been on the fence, off the fence about it. Traffic, okay? There has been no traffic study done. You guys know that. I get up early in the morning, I go to bed at 8:30. I'm up at 4:45, 4:30, 3:35. If you go right now, tomorrow morning, and sit by the park, in 1 hour and 40 minutes, you'll count 77 cars, 58 to 77 cars. Why can I do a traffic study and they can't? Ludlow's going to come to New Reams. You know, you got Lisa and Russell, sure, they want a place there. They live on the other side. Other people live on the other side. We have to deal with that traffic nonstop. Kids, elderly, you have people in scooters, you know, you got people walking with walkers. And what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to our neighborhood? Their development is nice. I think it's nice, but we have to think of the traffic. You got to think of kids. You guys all have kids, right? How do they cross the street? How do your grandkids cross the street? They look both ways. Do people texting look both ways? Do people answering their phone look both ways? What's one of the biggest leading causes of accidents? Texting? Phones? All these people are going to be leaving in the morning, going to work, and they're going to have to text their boss, I'm going to be late. Anybody want something from Starbucks? They're all going to be looking down, coming around that curve. And we're going to have a lot of accidents. So hopefully you guys would do the right thing and really think about it and be conscious and don't worry about tax dollars and everything else and think of our community and our safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Doc Sullivan.
Good evening. My name is Doc Sullivan, Chair, Council, or Commercial, Commissioners. A couple quick questions to point out here. You've already heard some of the negatives from the people here that have already talked. What you didn't hear from the presenter is some of the concerns that we had in the first place. That property has been currently zoned the way it is for 20 years. The property owner has done nothing in 20 years to bring commercial in there. However, across the street, there's a drugstore and a bank. On the other side, same size lot. There's a Chevron station and a little shopping center in there. Now they want to change the zoning to high density rentals. I got to admit, I give credit to the lawyer at that first meeting we had, because everybody was upset. He says, it's not apartments, it's casitas. Excuse me, you can call them casitas, you can call them bungalows like they did at Litchfield and Greenway, but they're attached. Those are apartments in anybody else's language. Got to give him credit. Like the fellow earlier said, that he earned his money. There's not as many people here tonight as there has been in the 2 other meetings. But all the emails I received said, please, Doc, go and speak. So I'm here. I guess my concern is the traffic. Ludlow is going to be a nightmare. In the very beginning, I decided I wanted to find out who are the players in this whole thing. Players, what I mean by players, are people who are going to benefit financially on your decision. Well, obviously, the lawyer is going to be financially paid. The owner of the property, who obviously didn't do his job over the last 20 years, that's why he's here today. And of course, the developer. They're all going to benefit from this. So my question is, you folks are going to have to make a decision here pretty quick in the next few minutes, whether this is something you want to rezone, table, or not move forward. So I'm going to consider every one of the commissioners up here that vote in favor of this rezoning as part of the players. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Yeah, many years ago.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes, if you'd please come up. If you'd please state your name for the record.
My name is Bob Imlay, and I live in Santa Helena also, very close to some of these guys that have spoken. I kind of like the idea, but what amuses me as I sit here and listening to people is their big issue is traffic. Certainly going to have a problem on traffic at Waddell and Reams. There's no doubt there. Then they're crying about we're going to have traffic on Ludlow as well as 153rd. So what do they think? If we go commercial and we leave the opening on Ludlow for egress and ingress, we're not going to have no traffic, right? Nobody's going to go up and down those streets. Maybe more so. Maybe more so. We have no idea what would be there, that's for sure, if it was commercial. No idea at all. We can think of a lot of bad things that could possibly be there. I don't know if they'll be there, but I just think it's phony to cry about traffic. We're going to have traffic either direction, and if it goes commercial, we're going to have worse traffic going in and out on Ludlow, and directly across the street is our housing with a street that goes into housing. It's going to greatly affect those people for a commercial opening there. So really, that's all I really want to say is just a traffic thing, because I think it's stupid for people to complain about the traffic, and we're going to have traffic either way. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else out there that would like to speak? Yes.
I'm Bill Thompson. I'm a resident of Santa Helena on the same street as a couple of the speakers just spoke. I guess I'd like to start by saying what a difference 6 months make, because I came here originally when I first heard about this project under a misconception that it was going to be like 3-story apartments, which didn't please me at all, and I voiced my opposition to it. Then I went to the first community meeting that the developers gave, which, as has been mentioned, was highly attended, which is kind of an understatement. And I was pretty ticked off then. and I voiced my objections to it also. Then I went to the second meeting that the developers gave, and I told them, quote, about their revised plan. My quote was, I don't like it. I really like it. And the reason I said that was because they listened to us and they did make changes that I think are an improvement. I agree, none of us have a crystal ball as to what it's going to be like 5 or 10 years down the road. So we can't say exactly what's going to happen with traffic and other things. I will say, as far as the first speaker said about the mindset of the renters versus owners, we've only lived in the development for less than a year, and we didn't realize when we moved in, there are already a lot of renters in there. A lot of the houses around us are not owned, they're rented. And I don't see any huge difference in them and us, if we want to use that phrase. So I like the presentation that they made. I think it looks great. They're all one-story units. I think they will add to the community and not detract like 3-story development would. And I probably pissed some people off who thought I was going to come up here and speak against it. But I have no problem with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak before we start the commission's discussion? Yes.
Chair, members of the commission, I don't know if now is an appropriate time for me or if there was a time where you would like for me to address some of the concerns that have been made. But as I stated earlier, my name is Brennan Ray. I am the high-priced attorney that has been referenced by the neighbors here representing Next Metro Communities. And again, I will take direction from this body as to whether now is an appropriate time or if the dais would like to have a discussion. I just need a little bit of direction on when do I get an opportunity to speak?
I think we'll give you that opportunity right now before we get started. I think there might be some questions or concerns from the commission that you might be able to address, but if you'd like to give a brief summary of the concerns that you have, I think that would be appreciated now.
Happy to, again, to do whatever this commission desires. One, and I have a full presentation if I need to get it. I don't know that that's necessary or appropriate in light of the thorough presentation that staff did and in light of the comments that you've heard from some of the residents. A few things that I would emphasize. Number one is we have tried to listen. And I believe that was evident from all of the comments that all of the residents have made tonight, whether they support us 100%, whether they support us 50%, whether they're even not too supportive of us. I think everyone echoed that sentiment that we tried to listen. We tried to address those concerns that were within our control and within our power to do so. Changes to the site plan, changes to location, reducing the number of units, moving a dog park that once was against our eastern property line up over to Reams. We have done everything that they've asked. There is a few lingering questions and concerns out there, some of which that I kind of would like to address. And if I may, just use a couple of slides from my presentation. I want to talk first about what this concept is, because there was a statement made about, well, these are apartments no matter what you call it. I guess technically we could say that they are apartments in the sense that they are a for rent type product. However, when we hear the word apartments over the course of my brief career and over the many cases that I'm sure this dais has heard in this commission, we think of apartments as 2, 3, 4-story, the traditional images pop to mind when we say apartments. This is not that. This is a lifestyle choice where people choose to live in this type of community. I've got some of the details. I won't run through them about the demographics, but you can kind of see on the slide before you what those demographics are, about how it is a more mature crowd. Yes, we do cater to millennials. We do see them. We see young professionals, but the demographics that we're pulling from a wide range of units, even though Next Metro's not been in existence too long, the concept has existed for a long time, started in Tucson in the 90s. And there is a sharing of data that takes place between these two companies. And so we're able to pull some of this information, and that's where all this is. But as I kind of move on through, and I won't, for your benefit, these are real examples of the housing product, but I don't think that's an issue, so I'm not going to dwell on that at all. Certainly trying to rip through this. That is obviously the plan, the access. But I want to focus on traffic, since that seems to be a common thread running through a lot of the comments. This is from the Cotton Gin PAD, the 2001. You can see on there the circulation plan that was proposed at that time, with various amounts of local streets, collector streets, entries, and so on and so forth. You'll see that commercial piece in particular had 3 entrances planned to it, one to Ludlow, one off of Reams, and then one off of Waddell as well. As has been stated here, we have initially provided one to Ludlow. We've since removed that, and that's a good thing. But I want to focus on what Ludlow and 153rd Street is, and that is a collector street. In the slide that Sergio put up that showed exactly what it was, it is designed to collect traffic and to take it to a location. It's not as if it's Calavar Road or Boca Raton or Redfield, some of these other roads that are local streets that are designed for local purposes. But Ludlow and 153rd are collector streets. Let's get traffic to a location and let's move it. And that's the way this Cotton Gin PAD was originally designed back in 2001, and that is how it is developed today. We would agree that commercial on this site would increase the traffic significantly and substantially along Ludlow and 153rd. At the same time, I'm not going to be stupid enough to stand up here before this commission and say, we aren't going to have any effect on Ludlow. Any new development will have effect, whether I have direct access to Ludlow or not. But we have to step back and look at, all right, what is the function of that street? How was it originally designed? I can't control what the design of that street was. And we hear that it's a concern. We heard, and you've heard today from our first neighborhood meeting to now, that there is a traffic problem today that exists. That traffic problem is there whether I come in or not, with cut-through traffic and all of that. So as you look, the gentleman made the statement that a traffic study was not done. That is a true statement. We have not done a traffic study because the city did not require it of us. What they did require is that we prepare a traffic impact statement, which we submitted back in February in accordance with the city's code and what we're required to provide. We provided that statement that was reviewed, I'm going to presume, by the traffic department, who looked at it and would have said, you know what, this makes sense. We don't need to go to the next level of a traffic study. But this was one of the things that's in this study is a trip generation comparison. And I won't go into the details, but to highlight a couple of things that if you look at, again, 4-letter word, apartments, the total daily trips, and that's what kind of people look at when they're assessing traffic and its impact, are the average daily trips and then the PM and the AM and PM peak hours. And you see that when compared our uses, a total of 884, as compared to if our site was to develop with 103 single-family homes, which is possible. It'd be a very tight, dense, single-family community, but nevertheless, the number of trips that would generate is about a 400 trip increase. And then compare that to a roughly 100,000 square foot shopping center, and you can see those numbers start to climb. So when looking at this, we see our use as a good use. Property needs to develop. That's why we live in this great nation, and there are private property rights, and people are able to exercise those. But as we continue to look further at this, we heard the neighbors' concerns. We wanted to talk in detail with the city because we said, well, all right, cut through traffic. How are some ways that we have seen in other communities that we can address cut through traffic? One of the ways is through speed humps, speed tables, maybe looking at a stop sign. And so we visited with planning and Lloyd and Sergio about, hey, here are some ideas that we have. Maybe we throttle down Ludlow in locations right around the curve, right around the park. That's a sensitive area. And so we talked with planning. They in turn talked with traffic. And this is a copy of the email that the traffic engineering manager provided to Lloyd in looking at this, because as they go through it, and I'm not going to pretend to know all the ins and outs of how traffic engineers work, but one of the things that they look at is, hey, well, let's look and see what the speed is along Ludlow and 153rd. And so back in 2014, as you can see, I'll try to use the little mouse to show it, up in there, they had a police trailer out there. So 3 years before we, well, 2 years technically, 2.5 years before we filed an application, but you can start to see the speeds at which they saw at it. And the speed statistics that are highlighted in blue down there, I think, are telling as to what they saw on Ludlow, in that the average speed was right around 17 miles per hour. That at the 85th percentile, there was, which is a pretty high rate, you're looking at about 26 miles per hour, and there was only 15% that exceeded the speed limit. And so when taking that into consideration, a stop sign or other traffic measures or means weren't appropriate. Again, going back to it being a collector road designed to collect and funnel traffic out to the arterials. So we've looked at the traffic, and we know that's a concern. We know it's a problem. I don't know that there's a solution to it. I don't know that saying deny this case is the right answer in response to a traffic question. Again, I won't rehash it, but we know that is a concern. We've tried to work with the city to be able to address it. The city, using their professional engineering standards and transportation standards, has come back and said, we can't do anything about it. And I defer to the community development director, or Lloyd or Sergio, someone, if there's another solution out there that we can be a part of, we're more than happy to do that. Part of it is, it's the way the community was designed back in 2001 when it was approved. There were a variety of other issues that came up, and I think that's the major one. I'm not going to go through each and every issue, or else we'd be here all night. And I know we were here a long time talking about a previous case. But with that said, if there is a specific question that I didn't address that this commission would like me to, as far as it was raised by the neighbors, I'm more than happy to do that. One thing that I will point out, you had me come up and talk about a wall. And I can assure you that our site plan, and I don't know if it was misread, mislabeled, or what, around the perimeter of our community. Oh, I got out of it. Crap. Now I'm in trouble. Sergio, work your magic. Hey, that's a little faster. This is the right one right here. You're good. Okay, so around the perimeter of our site, there is a solid wall. It is a solid masonry wall. There is no view fencing on our perimeter. Our residents come here because they like security and they like privacy. There is no view fencing along our perimeter. There is view fencing around our pool, right there. And then there is partial view fencing along the back of these residences that, as you would expect, partial view fencing on this open space area, which is appropriate and consistent and good with the way you like to see things develop. So again, whether it's by stipulation or we need to clarify, I can assure you that there is no view fencing in the residents as well around the perimeter of our community. So with that, again, I'm happy to answer any additional questions that this commission might have, but we're consistent with the general plan. We've tried to move heaven and earth to address the neighbors' concerns. We're okay with the stipulations under the site plan, and we would request this commission's recommendation for approval in accordance with staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to our commissioners. Why don't we start with Commissioner Norberg?
I have a quick question about how we're going through this. Are we going to be talking about the first part and then vote, or how are we doing that?
What we're going to do is we'll discuss both items and we'll vote on them separately. So we can discuss the whole project right now, but we will vote on them separately.
Okay, I do have, when we're talking about making it, going from commercial to residential, honestly, I don't like that spot, that lot for commercial because of the ingress and egress from it. I think I used to have a storefront in a little strip mall, and I would never want to have a business in a location like that off of the main arteries there, because that's, I think, where a lot of people are going to go. There would be access on Ludlow in and out. But one of the things that I don't like is having a commercial property that ends up being empty. And I think the last thing the people want in the community that live around there is to put something up that ends up not being successful, and then you have empty buildings, empty businesses. We're dealing with that in some other areas in Surprise right now, and it affects the other businesses. So when it comes to the zoning change, I think having it residential is the best thing for that spot. And it has been zoned commercial for 20 years and nothing has happened. And I wonder, is it because nobody who has or wants to open a business wants to go into that spot if it has been available? I mean, we're talking about 20 years and nobody has gone in. These are some of the concerns that I have about about keeping it commercial. I might have some other questions or comments to make on that, but I think I'm sorry. I don't really want to make any comments on going forward until we vote on whether or not it even passes for the zone change. Because I think it would be, if it doesn't pass, for example, we're talking about something that might be irrelevant. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but I think that we have the opportunity, if we'd like to spend that time, right now would be the time to do it.
Okay, then I may have questions after. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Coldham.
Questions and comments. As a resident of District 6, I've watched this blank piece of land include kids riding bikes, piles of dirt accumulating for great jumps, and if I were a BMX bike kid, I would have been out there doing it too. Knowing the history of the commercial property and having had the opportunity to attend both community outreach meetings, I have never seen a developer or an applicant bend over backwards and try to create a project that improved the community, that took a difficult corner commercial lot and turn it into something productive and nice. Anytime I hear a comment from friend, resident, community member that speaks to different economic levels of a resident, we as a city mature and become a better city when we have opportunities for multiple types of residential living. I know we as a city have for long had not had multiple different styles of residences for people to live in, whether they're professionals or whether they're low income. But for me, I think this community is a better place when we have multiple types of residences, especially residences that some might want to utilize that don't want a yard, don't want an expensive single family residence, and such. I have to commend the applicant, having received the mailed communications. For me, District 6 in that corner lot, it's been a concern to me, so I've been at those meetings to listen to residents' concerns. And to quote Mr. Thompson, you caught my attention at the second meeting when you said, "I don't like this project, I love this project," or something like that. So last piece is, this is a mailer that I received that shows the edges of the property as having a wall. So just a little piece of documentation there. I have no piece in this decision other than looking at what's best for our community, and given the history of this commercial piece of property, and all of the accommodations that the applicant has made, I don't know that traffic concerns are an issue to me if our city staff who focuses on those projects have communicated an issue. So I have to take a look at the details and the information factually, having attended the community meetings. That's my contribution tonight, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenbaum.
No questions.
Commissioner Smith.
You know, I have had lots of conversation and I've had lots of communication via email from residents. And has it been 50-50, whatever? It has been negative to start. It got a little less negative after the second meeting. I don't like to see commercial property be turned into residential. I think eventually, long term, we're going to need commercial property to properly serve all the residences that we have around them. And from what I've heard from residents and their concerns, at this point, I can't support this particular project. I have no other comments at this time.
Commissioner Bash.
I really appreciated the comments that we received from the meetings. I would hope that that would continue whenever we have outreach meetings, because it's good to read what was said on both parts. With that, I have no other questions.
Okay, my only comments is I would, while this property is set here for, somebody said 20 years, not sure how many, but a long time, that the impact of taking this commercial property, I think, would be not in the best interest of our community. We still have adjacent property across the street on the southwest corner of the beginning of Prasada. We have places to the south that would be, I'm sure, other residential areas there, that I think this is a very valuable piece of property. This person is not the only person that has property that's been sitting around for a number of years. I know that we had a piece of property over on Bill that sat around for many, many years. And since that time, we've, I think there's been at least 4 to 5 different new products, buildings that have been started and completed, all within a short period of time. I think the market will prevail to tell when this property is ready. I think that a lot of issues that I don't know or understand about the market, about the pricing, about what it is that can be done, but I think we only have so many valuable pieces of commercial property, and I'd like to see it stay that way. That's my opinion. Are there any other questions that we have from the commission? This is a public hearing. If there are any other questions from the community or the audience?
I just have one. I don't beat up. I'm just curious.
If you speak, yeah,
I'm just curious why.
speak in the mic if you would, please. Thank you.
Just that maybe help sway my opinion. Not sure what happened. Why the community development people, why they feel there's such a need for this. Why are they stamping this thing as a go product? I'm not sure I understand that. If someone could address that.
Chairman, members of the commission. So, we take every application in and we run it through our processes. We don't make opinions or judgments based on this or that on the project. We look at the general plan, we look at the zoning ordinance, and we look at the requirements of the city, and then we take it before the commission to then through the public discord to then take a vote on it. So on our end, if it didn't meet the general plan, if it didn't meet the zoning ordinance, or if it didn't meet certain design standards, then we don't bring it forward to the commission unless so requested by the applicant. In this case, the applicant has basically adhered to all codes, conditions, requirements, ordinances, and the general plan in the community. So therefore, we have a duty to take it forward in front of the commission for the public discourse. That's the reason for doing it this way, sir.
So again, the only reason why we're here today is because they forced the issue to try to get it rezoned. You're basically, just so I understand, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you guys aren't big proponents of this. You're doing this because they followed the letter of the law to get it to this point. Is that correct?
Chairman, members of the commission, this was an application that was requested, and therefore we take it forward.
Okay.
I do have one question in regard to that. Did you make a recommendation for this to be approved?
Chairman, members of the commission, we did make a recommendation for this to be approved based on some conditions, specifically as stated in your staff report. We made those recommendations based on the judgment of staff on how it met with the city code, how it met with the general plan, and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Are there, excuse me, if you'd like to stand, the people, this is being on television, so you need to speak in the mic so they
Didn't
can hear you.
understand. You saying it was or it was not? I didn't quite hear that.
Chairman, member of the commission, since it met code requirements, we took forward a recommendation of approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission, who has, again, it's just a recommendation. The Planning and Zoning Commission has the right to go with that recommendation or deny that recommendation or make a recommendation of denial. We are a recommending body to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommended body on the zoning issue to the City Council.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more. Unless I'm wrong, it appears that this type of development, this hybrid, quote unquote, is probably going to fly in Marley Park because it's already zoned for that. So there's going to be minimal resistance on the community there to prevent that from happening. In addition to the now started development there on Litchfield and Greenway, now we're going to have, if you pass this, we're going to have 3 hybrid type communities within a very small radius. I mean, I think that's possibly oversaturation, and they're all vying for the same type of tenant to be in that complex, and there's not enough millennials or even older folks with that means of income to cover those 3 areas. I just think that needs to be taken into consideration of oversaturation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing and have any further comments. I do have one comment about this that came up while we were looking at the presentation, that the income of people that typically live in these types of units have an average income of $75,000 to $80,000. What is the mean average income in Surprise? Do we know that?
Chairman, members of the commission, and I could be corrected by our ED staff, but I believe it's 46,000.
Okay, are there any other questions from the commission at this time?
No, I think that we should look at taking a vote on just the zoning before we look at the site plan.
That's the order that we're taking. We'll take item number 4, which is the major PAD amendment, which is the consideration for the rezoning. If no other comments, then I'd like to have a motion.
I move to recommend denial to the mayor and city council of the major PAD amendment to the Cotton Gin Planned Area Development PAD to allow multifamily residence as permitted land use on the 10.8 acres approximate parcel located on the northeast corner of Waddell and Reams because of resident concern, traffic concerns, and viability of the project.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Before we vote.
You can explain this again.
Let's get this clear. A yes vote would be to deny the major change plan PAD amendment to change the zoning. Is that clear to everyone? A yes vote would be to deny the major plan amendment. With that said, with no further discussion, then could we please vote?
Motion fails.
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. You can't see it.
No.
What? Matthew Keating didn't
Oh,
vote.
I'm Matthew Keating.
Oh.
I had to move because my system didn't work. Okay, so with that the motion failed. Let me ask our legal folks, at this time, do we need to make a motion to approve it, or can we take the negative vote as a positive vote to approve it?
Mr. Chair, the motion was to deny, and that carries the day, and so consequently it is denied. And so at this point, you don't need to go on to the site plan if that's what you're.
No, just the opposite of that.
One point of clarification. So I think what the commissioner is asking, since the denial motion failed, do they
Did
need
it
to make
fail?
another motion? Yes, the denial motion failed.
Oh, because there's 4 no's.
So now you.
Oh, yes. Yes, so there needs to be another vote. I'm sorry. I got caught up in this. Yes and no
It
stuff.
might be easier.
Yes.
Could we have a motion of this with consideration of approving it?
I move to recommend approval to the mayor and city council on the major PAD amendment to the Cotton Gin Planned Area Development to allow multifamily residential as a permitted land use on the 10.8 acres parcel located on the northeast corner of Waddell Road and Reams Road.
Do we have a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Could we please vote?
Motion passes 4 votes in favor, 2 against.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 5, is the consideration action on a site plan that would allow for the VIA rental housing units development located on the northeast corner of Waddell Road and Reams. Are there any further questions regarding the site plan? If not, then I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve a site plan for the VIA rental housing unit development located on the northeast corner of Waddell Road and Reams Road, subject to stipulations A through F, as listed in the staff report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Could you please vote?
Motion passes 4 votes in favor and 2 against.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations so far on your motion to move forward. Next item, business number 6, is a discussion and direction pertaining to any future agenda items. Do we have any from our commission?
I actually do have a question regarding signs.
Could you speak? We can't hear you. There we go.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question regarding the signs that we have in the city. And I'm sorry, give me a second here. I wanted to show the picture that is here, the notice of public hearing. I'm curious as to why we don't have a website, something that's a little bit easier for people to see, because quite often these are very difficult to have access to, and people are driving by and what they're seeing is a phone number. I don't know about you guys, but a phone number while you're driving is quite difficult to remember, but a website such as surpriseaz.gov is a lot easier, and people, honestly, they're working Monday through Friday. If they call, they're not going to want to call on a break. And I think it's easier to do to look up things on their own time to find out about these and it's kind of bugged me for a while, because even going out to look at some of these, that you can't even tell that there's a notice of public hearing out there. So I'm just wondering if that's something that we can discuss, or is it going to be part of the sign ordinance that we're going to be hearing soon? Is this part of it?
Chairman, members of the commission, that's something we can go ahead and have the signs. I don't think that it wouldn't necessarily be on the sign ordinance. It's more of our public notification piece. I don't think it's something. I don't think we have an issue with having
Okay.
that. Because we actually require the developers to put that out there, and we give them a template. So it's just basically adding it to the template.
Okay, and then also, when are they supposed to be taken down? Because I've stopped and went, are we having another meeting? And it's a meeting that was happened, a long time ago, and the sign is still there. So is there a time frame that these are supposed to be removed? Because there are some that the wind damage, they look awful. And I think that reflects on the city.
Chairman, Commissioner Norbert, that's something we can talk with code enforcement about. I know we've had complaints about other signs being up in the city. There's some other signs in the city that have been up for a very long time. However, they haven't been heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, because they're still going through staff review. So in those cases, they would stay up, but we can look at the ones that we've approved and see what we can do on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other discussions pertaining to any future agenda items? Yes.
Chairman, members of the commission, unfortunately, I wasn't here for the report, but one of the items that you'll have coming forward to you in July will be elections for chair and vice chair. We're up to that year. It's a 1-year appointment, and then go on and move forward. So we will be bringing that back to the commission in July at one of the July meetings.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or discussions? Then I adjourn this meeting.